Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Fake crowd noise? The Emirates never sounded so good. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Now you're welcome back. So we're turning our attention to Serbia versus the Republic of Ireland tomorrow. Huge game for both sides. Live commentary here on Off the Ball if you can't get to a TV. 7:45 kickoff. That will be followed by Luxembourg in Dublin on Saturday, and then the following Tuesday, which is today week, it's Qatar, Ireland in a friendly. But really, by a distance, the most important game is Serbia tomorrow evening. The group, lest you need reminding, is Serbia, Portugal, of course, Azerbaijan and Luxembourg. Very happy to say to preview, we are joined by former Republic of Ireland international Gary Breen. Hey, Gary.
Good afternoon.
Great to have you with us, and very happy to say Vinny Perth with us as well. Vinny, how you doing?
How you doing, Joe? How's things?
All good. So let me throw you Dragan Stojkovic, 56 years of age, his first game in charge of Serbia, a former Yugoslav captain in his day, and he said, this is a difficult group. I'm not so crazy as to say that Ireland have no clue. They do. Ireland can be uncomfortable to play against, but I can't accept that they can play better than us. And then he's doubled down today. Dragan said, the Irish will force that British style. I would not be satisfied with a draw against the Ireland. Gary, I don't know about you. I think he rates us.
Yeah, I don't think he's got the message that Stephen Kenny's trying to change the perception of Irish players around the world. I think it's quite an attritional style he think we're going to play. I think they refer to it as island football, which basically means defensive-minded, counter-attacking style. So I don't think he's understood just what Stephen Kenny's trying to achieve with this group of players.
As a player, would you take any heed, Gary, back in the day of a manager saying something like that on the eve of a big game, or no?
Not really, I don't think so. Certainly as a young player, possibly Joe, and the manager might have put it up there, but experience tells you that words mean very little, to be perfectly honest, and it's about our performance. I'm fascinated by this game, Joe, I really am, because first game of any qualifying campaign is so important. But this one feels the pivotal one. It really does. And if you think about the fact that we've only been at 3 World Cups, that first result was so important to get points on the board. We managed to do that on those 3 occasions, no surprise. And I think we need to do it in this game. I genuinely do. I think if we don't, we're going to give ourselves a mountain to climb. It's
quite a strange schedule as well, Vinny, in that there's this initial burst, Vinny, and then there'll be nothing until September, because obviously the Euros delayed have to happen over the summer, where there would often be games, and then we'll return in September and it'll be done by November. So it's a stuttery kind of sprint, Vinny, and I guess, you know, injuries and everything at the moment. If Stephen Kenny could just bite your hands off, get 4 points, and then it's such a long time that you don't even need to think really too much about September.
Yeah, I think as Gary said, the start is huge. 4 points, you'd pull your hand off now for 4 points. There's no doubt about it. But it's obviously it's a strange time. Injuries, everything else that comes with it means, and I suppose we have to be realistic. What's come before this, as much as the last 8 games in one sense don't mean a hell of a lot, I think they've added to, let's call it, the pressure of this game. And I think the staff will feel that. They may say in the press, no, it's just about this next game. But I think everything that's gone on around the Ireland squad over the last sort of 8 games has meant that it's a really, really difficult start to a World Cup campaign. And but like anything, it can go both ways. And if it was a positive result, then like anything, it just flips and it's back in the positive mood for Ireland heading into a Luxembourg game.
Yeah, I think it's good you made that point about the pressure on them, because Stephen Kenny has been unflappable, and yet you can't go 7 games without a goal. You can't miss out on the chance to go to the Euros. You can't have the situation with Alan Kelly and Damien Duff and feel, Vinny, like it's all gone to plan. You know, there's got to be somewhere in his mind, he's got to be thinking, God, this really, if you told me this was how it was going to go, this was not the plan. So I guess with Serbia, you can flip everything on its head, or it will really ramp up the scrutiny, I suppose.
Yeah, completely. And listen, I know him really, really well. I know this week he'll be in a zone where he will be able to forget what's gone over the last 7 weeks or 7 games, 8 games. But there's no way he could have forgotten that up until last week. But he'll get into the zone like all good managers do, and the whole focus will be Serbia, and then Luxembourg after that. But I think we've only to look at international rugby as a prime example. And if you look at Eddie Jones and the Ireland head coach,
Andy Farrell.
If you look at the two of them, the weekend. One is heading to lose his job and under massive pressure. Lots of articles about him. And the other one is just beating France and is quite comfortable enough, disappointed with how it's gone. And then the following day, or just after kickoff, it's completely flipped where Eddie Jones is scrapping to save his job and Andy Farrell is gone off on his holidays with a sombrero on his head. Yeah. So that's international football. That's sport at the highest level, and it's tough going, and Stephen will know that. And one result can turn it from. If they were to beat Serbia and Luxembourg, then he's on a crestable wave and magic can happen. Yeah. So that's how fickle it is, and that's just the way it is.
No, it's true. And Gary, to extend Vinny's parallel there with Andy Farrell, the point as well has been made that for Andy Farrell now, he's got 4, 5, 6 months of feel-good factor around the place. And similarly for Stephen Kenny, God, if they'd get a poor result and or performance in Serbia, it's a long way to September where every time the team is mentioned, he's mentioned, there's an air of negativity about the thing. Again, look, if they get a great result, it'll be the opposite. So I think the point we're making here is the stakes are bloody high here.
They're huge, they really are, John. And you're so right, both of you, to say that, because that length of time going into that on the back of this dismal run continuing would really ebb away at the confidence. It really would. And there are some doubts now coming amongst the supporters. You know, we can't be naive enough to say there isn't. People who would have really backed Stephen Kenny are now starting to question the appointment. Now, the important thing is that never seeps into the changing room, because I believe that this group of players do believe in Stephen Kenny. And if you listen to the sound bites coming out of the press conference, they're talking about confidence. Now, from the outside looking in, you're saying, confident? Yeah, you've only scored from a set piece 1 goal in 8 games, and you're talking about confidence. But Vinny will tell you, sometimes when you're within a group or within a team, you feel like you're on the cusp of something. Now, the results might back that up, but you feel you are. And I do believe that these players believe in their manager and what they're trying to achieve. But the bottom line in international sport at the highest level is results. You can talk about philosophy as much as you want, but he will be judged on results. And as long as this losing run continues, he's going to find it difficult.
So do you think, Gary, for instance, the confidence is based on things like the chances created against Slovakia when it really, really counted? That's the kind of thing which registers with players. Yeah,
well, listen, Joe, that's the only reference we keep hearing, isn't it, about the Slovakia game? And to a certain extent, when Stephen was addressing someone recently, he was talking about the under-21s in terms of how they played. Now, that's because they don't have a body of work to go back to other than those references. Now, in terms of what he's tried to achieve within a year, it was so unlikely that it was going to be to the fanfare that he initially came in with. How could it be? Certainly with the pandemic, certainly with the fact that those young guns that we build as the next generation, none of them have come through to the extent that we thought they may. It's been O'Shea and Knight at Derby who've really impressed, but the other guys have really struggled as such in terms of getting that consistency. But that's the norm with young players. That was always going to happen. But if anyone who said that at the time, as if we were being negative, no, but it's just a realistic and experienced approach that these young guys are going to take time. So I think he needs our support more than ever, Stephen Kenny, now. I genuinely believe that. I don't think this is a time now for us to start doubting him. I think we've got to really get behind him, really get behind this group of players. But ultimately, they're the ones who've got to produce it on the pitch.
To add to his woes, I suppose, the injury list has been ever expanding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he can count himself unlucky genuinely in a host of different ways. Caoimhín Kelleher and Darren Randolph both gone. I mean, I can't remember the last time our first and second choice keepers were both gone. So Mark Travers is going to start. Played 2 games for Ireland, New Zealand and Bulgaria back in 2019, those 2 friendlies. James McCarthy gone with his groin. John Egan gone with his foot injury. Conor Hourihan added to that list over the weekend. Callum O'Dowda, who had done okay in a couple of games for Kenny, gone. Adam Ida gone. Kevin Long out. And interestingly, Michael O'Neill of Stokes is kind of surprised James McLean has rocked up, and he's kind of said, look, I don't think he's going to be fit. I mean, you can have him, but I don't think he's going to be fit. So, look, that's a healthy number, Gary, in anyone's money. I mean, that is tough.
Joe, and also, you say about Michael O'Neill saying that about James. Graham Potter said that Connolly's not fit enough to get on the bench. So we're expecting him 3 or 4 days later to play in a big international game. Listen, I know these players and I've been there. You are desperate to get over. You'll make out you are fit. But sometimes in that exuberance, you've got to put the team first. I made a decision not to play in that iconic game against Holland because I'd done all the fitness tests and I just didn't feel I would be able to perform. I had to step away. And that was a hard thing to do. Maybe I was a bit more experienced, but these guys have got to put the team first. They cannot be saying, yeah, I'm fit to play if they're not.
Right. I didn't realise that. Did you pass the fitness test? Will they let you play?
No. I I delayed an operation with Coventry at the end of that Premier League season. But the 2 or 3 weeks from finishing that Premier League season to then playing for Ireland, you drop down, you're not playing, and I just couldn't get back up there. When it's over with Dublin to do the fitness test, and I was nowhere near it, unfortunately, I had to step aside. So I hope these guys put the team first.
There are sorry, Vinny. Go on, Vinny.
Just wondering on that, Gary, is that different because back then, we had real strength and depth? There was maybe Dunny was back up to you at that stage, or maybe he was playing with you.
Stan
played. Yeah, so was it different when you feel there's a bit of backup, or do you say, like when you look at Conley coming there, now he's a young lad, it's different where he goes, the team needs me tonight, I'm going to...
Yeah, listen. Absolutely. I do take your point, of course you do. And listen, if Mick had said at the time, listen, we've got no one else, of course I would have gone out there and done it. You're quite right. But I think it's important. I think for those lads to make that decision, you may say we haven't got options, but there are other people, there are fit people, and you can't underestimate how important that is.
Conley's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you feel he really is one of our biggest threats. His last game was 4 weeks ago, Vinny. He has scored 2 goals in 18 this season. He scored against Wolves and scored against Newcastle, and he missed a good chance against Spurs, so maybe could have had a couple more. So with Connolly, you feel he's so important, and yet, I don't know, if it was a player in a different position, less explosive position, potentially like a holding midfielder or something, you would say, OK, look, not being at his absolute sharpest, he'll get away with that. But when you're in that kind of up front and you need those quick bursts here and there, that's a worry.
You have to be fit and sharp in midfield, Joe.
Nah, you sit there and you spray it around, sit in the centre circle, and don't mention centre half.
No, easy enough. To be fair, I think Connolly is the type of guy who he's already becoming a bit of an enigma in terms of, you see him and like he's got a bit of trouble this week as well for lockdown rules, etc. But he is one of them that if you throw him in, he could do anything on the day. He could be Ireland's best player, not looking fit for his club, and he could. And Stephen has to decide whether it's worth the gamble of throwing him in and doing something like that. Like, you're right, his last game was against West Brom and he lost and he was taken off after 60 minutes. He certainly hasn't pulled up trees for his club. And it does go back to Gary's point about a year ago we were looking at all these lads thinking they're on the way through. Ireland are going to be great. Stephen Kenny's sort of 21s are going to be brilliant. And they just haven't kicked on for various different reasons, which we all expected was most likely the way. So I think Connolly's one of them where I imagine he's difficult enough in training. He's cocky. He has a little bit of brashness about him, but at the same time that can be good as well. And if you challenge that in the right areas on the pitch in a big game where he feels inspired to go and do something for his country, it could work. But it's a massive risk starting him in the game because he just hasn't played.
I don't know if you remember, Gary, it was interesting when Ireland played Finland. It's hard to remember all the games, I know, but Connolly had a lot of big moments in that game and could have scored, but equally could have passed the ball inside a few times and took on the shot. There was a selfishness there, which, look, maybe you need, maybe you don't. But he had the self-awareness in the interview afterwards in Sky Sports when he was asked where he could improve. He said, I was a bit selfish. You know, it was kind of unusual admission from a young player. He was confident enough to admit he was a bit selfish. Where are you on Connolly and what he could be for Ireland?
Oh, potentially. I was excited like everyone else was. And I think in terms of decision-making on the pitch as a young player, and you've got to understand, Joe, as a young player playing for Ireland, he's got a sight of goal. His eyes are going to light up, aren't they? He's not going to see, and that's where you're looking for that little bit of experience, a little bit of know-how. But I'm excited by him. Of course I am. But I was always wary for all those lads. I was particularly excited about Parrott, and it just hasn't happened at Millwall. He struggled to get his goals at Ipswich in League One. But I know that this is part of their development, it's part of their learning curve, and then they can come strong and be the players that we hope they could be. But I was always a bit wary that it could happen within the 12 months. But I'm looking at the situation in terms of the team, and Vinny, I wonder if you'll agree here. I've never felt the Ireland team's been picked on club form. It can't be, because we just don't have that strength in depth. It's picked on the best players, and now this is historically the case. You can go back to the likes of our greatest goal scorer, Robbie Keane, not being in the team at Inter Milan, at Tottenham, at Leeds sometimes, and Liverpool. Of course he plays for us. So, and there's a lot of us, not at his level, but who had similar situations, weren't in our Premier League team for whatever reason. So you can come in and produce, whether or not Stephen thinks that these players can do that. Obviously, the big one in terms of that is Shane Duffy. people talk about his form means he can't play. I don't believe that for one moment. I think he can come back into that squad where he has a real presence, a real trust of his teammates. He knows what is expected of him. The big question of whether or not he plays is not about his club form for me. That's, to a certain extent, that's irrelevant. And I like the fact that he's come out of the Celtic team because it gave him a little bit of a rest, a breather, because it seems that with every game, things were going from bad to worse. And I've been in that situation. Sometimes you need to come out of the firing line and just regroup.
Yeah.
But I think the big decision on whether he plays is, what's the tactic going to be? Are they going to pass it out from the back? Now, if that's the case, then you may well be looking at other centre-halves to do that.
Well, that's very interesting. I'll come to that in a moment. To stick on the who's going to score theme for a second. So that's Conley. Vinny, let me throw the names and numbers at you. I put these to Dan McDonnell yesterday in the show, and in the context of I keep forgetting this, with 5 teams in the group, 4 with 2. In the context of 8 games, which is what Stephen Kenny has here, these numbers are pretty stark. So there's Conley with his 2 goals in 18. Ronan Curtis, he has scored 2 goals in his last 22 games at Portsmouth. We have Callum Robinson, who, when he scored those 2 goals at Stamford Bridge in September, I think we all thought, wow, brilliant, this could really work out. But since Sam Allardyce has arrived at West Brom, he hasn't really featured. His last game was the 2nd of February. Shane Long, in fairness to him, for Bournemouth, has scored 2 goals in February. And then James Collins, who Stephen Kenny strongly hinted today in his press conference probably would start and be that, lone striker leading the line. Now, he played for Luton on Saturday. His last goal was in February. He has scored 1 in 19. So the figures would bear out. We need someone, by their own standards, to absolutely catch fire, or else we're just going to need goals from all around the pitch here, set piece and beyond. That has been our big problem since Robbie Keane departed. It very much remains, Vinny, our big problem.
Yeah, and I think the one for me is Shane Long. I think his pace in behind, I think we're not going to have lots of the ball. I don't think so. Therefore, for me, I'd play him and almost a bit of a counter-attack style with him. I think he's playing regularly. You're right about Callum Robinson. Like, he hasn't played. He got whipped off maybe 6-7 games ago for West Brom. Albeit he's done okay for Ireland. And I take Gary's point. And I completely agree. We have to ignore club form to a point when you're in an international team like Ireland. But I just don't see the goals. I don't see the goals from James Collins. I don't think he gives us the presence that if Stephen is going to stick to the style he has played those 7-8 games, that's why I understood him putting someone like Adam Ida into the team, because it was a focal point. It was someone he could hit and lead the line. I'm not sure James Collins does that to a good enough level for the game that's ahead of us in Serbia. So I think we need to try something different. And as I said, I think they play with 3 at the back. It's hard to know, but someone like Long and his running power and his selfishness of closing people down is probably what we need. And it's a slight change to what Stephen would want, I understand. But that way you can have Alan Brown maybe in a 10 position, or Conley playing off the left if he's fit enough, or maybe Matt Doherty off the right, and it's a bit more something a little bit different with that ball in behind. And I don't think we can play up through the towards against these. I don't think we'll get away with it. I think at least in one area, particular front, we have to have something different. And if Shane Long doesn't start, I'd be disappointed for him as well. And I think as the senior striker in the squad, I'm surprised he hasn't had more game time in those last 8 internationals. I know we pulled Delvick up the squad, but I think it'd be a mistake not starting him tomorrow night against this. Really do believe that.
Very curious for your thoughts on all that, Gary.
Yeah, listen, I was going to ask the question, Joe, to Vinny, to be perfectly honest. Vinny, you know Stephen Kenny so well. We talk about this philosophy of playing through the thirds. In terms of how difficult it has been in his opening 8 games, do you feel at any stage now he'll go away from what he wanted to do initially and he'll be a bit more pragmatic? Now, I know that the Dundalk team that was so successful could be pragmatic at times to be successful. Will he go away now from that philosophy that was the big drum that everyone was banging at the beginning of his tenure to say, listen, we're going to play differently, we're not going to be so attritional? Will the pressure, or will he look at this situation and say, no, I'm going to have to change how I want to play and get us through this difficult time, navigate these difficult waters?
To be honest, it's $1 million question. And we spoke about 2 weeks ago, and ironically, we didn't speak about football. We spoke about each other's family, and I just didn't want to go down that line with him. because he's more into his fullbacks overlapping. It's attack-minded, possession-based. It's, all of that stuff. That's his beliefs. That's what he believes in. If the other team score 3, then he would like to score 4. And to get that into this stage, it's hard to know, because ultimately he's got to get results. He's not a foolish man. He knows where he stands. And I think we've seen a slight change in the last couple of games, albeit it's hard to gauge it. But I think he'll go with more 2 sitting midfielders.
Yeah, that's been the most noticeable change, certainly.
Yeah, so from the start, he was playing with 2 8s. And they were running all over the place, and they were so open in midfield. Ireland were in the first couple of games, even in the playoff game where they'd done so well, but they were still very open on a counter attack. So I think straight away he's learned from that, and so that's a good sign. It means he's learned, but he will want his fullbacks overlapping. He will want them making expansive runs and etc. So I don't see him changing too much. I don't see him playing 3 at the back. And I think part of the problem with switching to 3 at the back is he's only got 2 days really on the training ground to change everything. I think we have the players to play 3 at the back, whether it's 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. But I don't see him doing it, and I'd be shocked if he did. So I think it's going to be more the same, and that's why I think with Long starting, it's a slight getting away from what he believed in. But I do think we're going to need an outball and a ball in behind the defence at times, away from home against a really strong Serbia side, despite what people will have you believe, their attacking players are very, very good. So I think he's got to be careful, and I don't see him changing. Long-winded way of answering it, Gary. No, I don't see him changing his beliefs too much.
It probably, Vinny, highlights what a lost David McGoldrick is.
Oh yeah, massive. And Adam Ida was another example. The 2 of them were perfect for what he wanted, someone to hit. The criticism I had of McGoldrick was he actually dropped too far. He would come in too deep and didn't give you the focal point, but his link-up play was really good. That was okay if we had. That's where it suited with Connolly and Robinson sort of playing as inverted wingers when he dropped. And that was something I think they may have worked on if he was in and around the team a bit longer. So, so it is a struggle to see what he can do. I mean, I've heard people ask me the question, would he try a false 9 maybe? And, someone like Troy Parrott, but I don't see Troy Parrott starting. I think it will be, as you said earlier on, James Collins or Long.
Yeah, he's pretty much hinted he wouldn't pitch Connolly or Parrott in rather at this level. Vinny made a point, Gary, I was going to put to you. I mean, it's worth remembering here, this team met in Manchester on Sunday, maybe had a small session there, but I don't think all of them could have partaken given the demands of the club football over the weekend. 1 session Monday, get a flight and probably loosen the legs this evening at the stadium. So in effect, no real time to change very much or to implement something radical there, because I love when Vinny talks about how Kenny wants to get overlapping fullbacks and really, try and take the game to Serbia on Wednesday. And yet, look, I've been raised on a steady diet here of let's get over there, let's sit deep, let's get compact, and let's pop the ball over the top to Shane Long, and he might replicate what he did against Germany if we're lucky. And worst case scenario, we might get out of there with a 0-0 draw. Look, that's I hate saying it, but that's kind of how you see the game in some ways.
Yeah, but there's you can put up a good defensive block and it could be well coached and stuff. Listen, I never want to take away the shine of that Germany result, but Germany should have scored about 5 goals that game. So that wasn't a defensive masterclass by any stretch of the imagination. So there are certain, if you want to adopt a defensive block, then coach it. And this is the remit, certainly when Stephen comes in, that the coaching, the organisation will be much better. You're absolutely right, Joe. In terms of being on the training ground and being able to get your message across, you'll struggle for time to do that. But you'll be have to do it with video. You'll be doing it with the lads in terms of talking it, little groups coming through.
Can that be effective, Gary, as a matter of interest?
Very much so. If your coaches can deliver that message, if they're good enough to do it now. We're hearing a lot about this new guy, Anthony Barry, coming in. Everyone speaks so highly of him. The next teammate of mine, Alan Moore, speaks glowingly about him in terms of how meticulous he is. I know Dean Kiley from a former teammate, he's one of my good friends. He's a brilliant coach as well. It won't be just about the goalkeepers. It'll be how he want to organise the goalkeeper. But all their instructions, coaches, will have to come from that manager. How do you want this team to play? Right, how are we going to execute it? How do we get this message across? Because in terms of that time frame, you could have a really experienced Grizzly team, and it'd be difficult in the time frame to get it over, let alone an inexperienced young team that we've got.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. So, well, look, let's hope the goals come from somewhere. Gary, to pick up on your point then on Duffy, and it'll depend as much on how Ireland want to play as his sense of confidence. So, we're presuming Coleman and Egan are the fullbacks. Obviously, Kieran Clark is in there. So, your read on Darragh O'Shea, have you seen much of him over the last while? And then where are you on Duffy?
I like Darragh O'Shea, I really do. I think it's a learning curve for him. It's a steep one, a tough one when you're down the bottom in the Premier League, because it can be like so tough.
Yeah,
you're exposed. So good, you're exposed. But his character, everyone talks about him in terms of willing to learn. So I think this will be great for his development. And I can see the attributes. And certainly, if you think about him in the under-21s, he's a key part of that defensive unit, wasn't he? With even in goal behind him as well. So if he It's a difficult one, Joe, because if he's not going to be selected now by the former under-21 boss, when is he going to be selected, essentially? Do you know what I mean? Because this is what's leaving...
Luxembourg at home is almost the worry. Yeah. Like, do you need experience for a night like this in Serbia?
Exactly, but then you're going back into the remit of Mick McCarthy, Martin O'Neill, and that... Like,
I'm coming out with all the horrible conservative short-termism I hate here, but I almost feel, can we just do it for this one game?
I know, and this is why I get so frustrated by it, because initially when everyone was telling me that they're going to play with super confidence under Stephen Kenny and we're going to throw the ball out.
I know. Sorry, but we haven't scored in 7 games, so now I'm thinking let's just retreat a touch. So
in terms of if he wants to play it from the back, then certainly O'Shea has got that capability to do that. I think Kieran Clark has as well. But the decision is to bring in Shane Duffy for his presence and that he can reproduce what he's done for Ireland, never let us down. I think he can do it. I genuinely do. I know that it's been a horror season from its Celtic. I had a similar season at West Ham. It's so difficult. It really is. And I hope that he gets back to the player that we remember, because there are a lot of reasons why in this pandemic year he's lost his father. It must have been so difficult for him. So I personally can't wait to see him back to his best in the green shirt. But that's got to come from the manager. He's got to judge whether or not that Shane Duffy is capable of coming back and doing that.
Yeah, you'd really love to see him arrive and feel good about life again in familiar surrounds, and
which you can do when you come.
I'm sure.
Familiar surroundings, you can do that.
Yeah, you mentioned all that club form stuff. Jason McAteer scoring against Holland popped into my head when you mentioned that game. He was in the doldrums at Blackburn. What about Vinny? I know you dropped out there a touch, but for Gary and I were just talking there, and I was saying, like, maybe it is a night. Like, I'm all on board with the Kenny project. I am 100%. But when push comes to shove,
exactly.
And
sorry, I'm jumping in here, but
Vinny,
this is it. This philosophy. If you Vinny, you know as a manager, if you suddenly have a philosophy, but when the going gets tough, you throw that out the window and start doing something else, you're going to lose the trust of those players. Yeah, he's got to persevere with it.
The only counter argument to that, Gary, is one player doesn't change your whole philosophy. So, so if he goes with, say, a Malumbi in midfield or a Jason Knight, for argument's sake, it's progress. It's moving towards the end goal. So I don't think one player, like by putting Duffy into the team, and I'm not suggesting you're saying that. I'm just saying one player changes his whole philosophy. I think if Stephen knew their team, I think that would change it, right? So what I mean by that is, if Mitrovic, you know this, Gary, has been a centre-half. If you said to Shane Duffy tonight, you're marking Mitrovic tomorrow, I want you to go out and just do a job on him. He will be, as an attacking force, their focal point.
Yeah.
But then I'd back Duffy over O'Shea to do that job. A defensive warrior, go out and do a performance for Ireland. I love you. Derry, do it for our country. All of that stuff that goes on in the background. I'll tell you what, I'd back Duffy over O'Shea to do that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know because there's a new manager in place.
Yeah, that's the difficulty. You're right.
The difficulty. So, and I think the Duffy argument, we won't go into it, but I understand that why he's struggling, because he isn't that good on the ball. Celtic have too much of the ball, etc., etc. But this could be a back against the wall performance where you may need to stick with Duffy in this case. That doesn't mean I don't think that means Stephen is throwing out his beliefs and all of that stuff. I'm not suggesting we're saying that. So it is a difficult call for him, and I think if he knew their team, It would make the job a hell of a lot. I don't know whether that makes sense to you, Gary, but that's where I would fall on.
Yeah,
no, it makes
and
sense.
you've got to take into account as well. And this isn't. You can't underestimate what a threat Shane is at set pieces, because they'll be so unnerved when he comes up. They genuinely will be, because he has that fear factor. He really does.
I guess isn't the interesting thing here, Gary? This may, even though it's not Stephen Kenny's ambition, but this just the way this may go. Serbia are coming out all guns blazing. They absolutely want to win this game. They have Portugal on Saturday. Even though it's not the road we want to go down, this may just turn into a backs against the wall warrior type night. That's kind of, you see, if you're Kenny, you're kind of half picking to, well, look, I don't accept the way we're talking about this game. I want us to have 10-minute spells of being in possession and work the ball up the pitch. So I'm going to pick a team to do that. And yet, at the back of your mind, you're thinking, if Serbia get into a flow, this could be a backs against the wall where I need those warriors in for the night. So he's kind of juggling those two things at the moment, I think.
Of course it is. And listen, I've gone into these games, and you've got an idea of how you want to play, and it doesn't go that way, and you have to adjust and stuff like that. But you can negate a lot of that threat, Joe, by keeping the ball.
Based on what you've seen, Gary, do you think this Ireland team can go out and will go out and keep the ball for 10-minute spells here and there and take the sting out of this game?
I'm not sure whether or not they're at the level to capably do that for enough of that 90-minute period, but I think it all depends on who you select. Now, if you're going to play Cullen in midfield, I do believe he's a midfielder you can play through. I think he can relieve a little bit of the pressure. As Vinny said, you kind of thicken up that centre midfield by maybe playing someone alongside him. And if Brown plays at 10, he comes back into that midfield and makes it look like a midfield more than, say, Brady does at 10. Listen, Brady gives us great options going forward, but out of possession, we look a little bit vulnerable. And there's a knock-on effect, as Vinny said, when Stephen first started, he's only playing a holding midfielder. And it's too easy for centre-forwards then to come off their centre-half and find space, and then there's problems. I think Coleman at right-back negates a lot of the problems that centre-halves have had, because he naturally narrows up quicker than Doherty does. And I think he's a good communicator as well. That's not to say that Doherty is not as good a Seamus Coleman, but I just think they're very different right-backs. I think Doherty's a brilliant wing-back, and I think Coleman's a brilliant full-back. So there are decisions to be made. I will see the tactics based on the players that he picks, because you have to be able to execute the tactics. You can go into that game and hope to play this particular style, but if you've got players who can't do it, it's going to be proven very difficult to do that.
Yeah. Vinny, that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, we can talk about defending all night, but God, the easiest way to defend would be if they can take the sting out of this by keeping the ball.
Yeah, and again, not to go over the point, like we've played Zenit St. Petersburg with Dundalk, and we set up with a mid-block, but there was a time and a place for keeping the ball. There was a time and a place where we had to send fullbacks in after number 10s because of the shape and all of this. And he will be pragmatic. That needs to be. There'll become a time where you let the opposition make 5 or 6 passes around the back. It won't be a press for the press sake. In fairness, a couple of good chances we had in the playoff game was due to air press, something that he would be a big believer in centre forwards pressing the ball. But there's a time and a place to do that. So I think he's in a very difficult situation. And it is funny, but having such a close relationship with him, I didn't ask him because I didn't want to know the answer, but I had a look at this earlier on. So if you bear with me for literally 2 seconds.
No, take your time. Take your time.
Travis, O'Shea, Malumbi, Knight, Cullen, Brown, Troy Parrott and Condy. 8 players. If 8 of them started, tomorrow, which I don't think they will, that would be 8 players. I think Brown would be the oldest at maybe 24. That would be 8. Like, that is such a young building squad. Yeah, we've a manager who's probably under a bit of pressure to get a result. So it's where he is in his headspace. Does he build with that squad, and does he put them players onto the pitch and say, add the odd Duffy in, Coleman, obviously, Doherty, maybe the 3 of them in, or does he bring a Robbie Brady, leave him in the team, play narrow off the right, or so he's in a real difficult situation, and I don't know the right answer to that. Does he say, well, I'm building a team, and you just have to trust me, and I'm putting these 8 young lads in, they're all under 24, the average age of my team is probably 22, 23, or does he go the other way? And I think we've got to make a decision as we wanted this change for so long. We wanted something different. And now that it's staring at us right in the face, the first challenge we've made, and I accept the 8 games were nothing short of dismal, I accept that. But we're at a crossroads now where I'd love someone like a head of the football in the FEI, and we don't really have one with the CEO, to make it clear to them, actually go and back yourself and pick your young team and let's build for the European Championships and the World Cup in 4 years' time and use this campaign to do it. And we don't take a long-term view here in Ireland about stuff like that. But I think it's a discussion that has to be had. And maybe he does that himself, takes that on himself and says, I'll take the flak, but I've gone and made these young players international players, because we have to build a team. Wales got to a European Championship semi-finals with a team. Yes, they had Gareth Bale to do the magic stuff and the free kicks and the wonder goals, but they were built on a team, and we have to build a team. And it's an interesting way to look at it. I was fascinated with so many young players in the squad. Could they all get into the team?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And Gary, I certainly wouldn't criticise him if he picked that team and he said, this is the way I want to do it, and this is how I'm doing it. You wish he had that contract to take him through to the Euros, so it wasn't like a kind of, there is a short-termism about his situation with the FAI. You'd maybe like them to come out as an association and say, we've tried X and Y for the last however many years, we're backing Stephen to take us through to the Euros, and he's going to start from day one, and yes, it's away in Serbia, and so it doesn't matter if it all blows in our face. There's going to be a few pitfalls here, but we are investing in youth and we're investing in this way of playing. And if they came out about it that clearly, then you couldn't really criticise them. Maybe to be fair, by hiring Kenny, they are coming out that clearly, and that's what they are saying.
If you were to say to me that Stephen believes that those young players were his best team, then I'd back it 100%, no doubt. You think they're your best team to get us through, yeah. But if you're saying that we're going to sacrifice a World Cup, I would have questions about that, because it's so difficult in terms of what it means to get to the World Cup for Ireland. I know we've only been there 3 times, but nevertheless, we can't just be writing off tournaments as such. And
sure.
And I've always had this thing as a young player, I would have been part of Mick McCarthy's kind of, I don't know if it's revolution, but taking over from Big Jack and that pioneer team of 88 and 90. And there was pressure attached to that. Of course there was, and criticism of whether or not these young players coming through were good enough. I was excited by it. I was determined. I hope that these lads are. But at the same time, there was still the 28, 29-year-olds who felt that they had so much more to give for Ireland. We can't just suddenly say, we're going to discard these guys who are 28 and 29, because ultimately, if you're picking your best 11, it's still a lot of those guys. These young guys have to earn the chance. It's not a case of just saying, oh, listen, you're the young guys, we want to do something for the future, because we can't predict where these guys, we couldn't predict where these guys are a year later, let alone in 4 years' time. We don't have a production line like the Germans were able to do it after that Oliver Bierhoff Germany team that they didn't like, and then they brought all that young team through and who were incredible, won the World Cup. We don't have that production line, unfortunately. So, no, I don't think Stephen Kenny can say that he can write off a World Cup. No, not by any stretch of imagination.
It's true on the EGs. It's hard to predict, because as we walked out of the French game in 2016, we said, well, we found our midfield in Hendrick, Brady and McCarthy.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just doesn't work out that way. Maybe, Gary, comes down to quality of performance. Like, there's different ways to lose to Serbia, and there's ways that show real signs of progression, and there's ways which... you lose 5-0 or you lose 2-1 playing great stuff. Like, it's not as simple as, well, you lost, therefore it means X or Y.
No, I hear that has... I agree with you to a certain extent, but I think at this stage now, 8 games in, we need points on the board. And if people say you're being old-fashioned, pragmatic, he has to do whatever he does just to buy himself a bit of time. That's not to say that he's staring down the barrel of a gun in terms of his job. I don't believe that for one moment, because I've said to you guys, we have to back him.
Yes.
We have to back him. But he can't be deviating from what ultimately got him the job, and that was to do what he wants to do. Now, if you're now saying that, I'll do it when the sun's shining and the birds are singing, but I'm not going to do it when the pressure's on, then how are these players going to be able to cope when they are in hostile environments and having to win games for Ireland? Because the honour of playing for Ireland is absolutely massive, but it's a massive responsibility as well, because of how much it means to everyone at home.
I guess, like everything else, Vinny, it's a balance, isn't it? He's not going to abandon his principles totally ever. But
No, it's a balance, and I wasn't suggesting that that's what he does. I'm just saying there is an argument for that, and there should be discussion about. We're not Germany. We're not any of these. We have to take a longer term view to build a team again. But I agree. We can't write off a World Cup campaign. Like I've already said, I'd start Shane Long tonight. He's 34 years of age, or tomorrow night. Put him in and let him lead the line for us, because I just don't. I just think he's the only one in any sort of. It's the only one nearly playing at this stage. Never mind in form. So I'm not saying that's what you do. I'm saying there's an argument that we take a longer term view of it. But I think that argument is easier if they start getting a couple of good results. Then he can make that argument. So, and again, it's a bit like Darragh O'Shea. I would start Duffy for his experience tomorrow, but I think Darragh O'Shea is well on the road to becoming, maybe even another Richard Dunn, that type of a centre half. I think. Oh,
that's a lot of pressure to put on him. Come on, let him be himself. You're talking about one of the best centre halves Ireland ever had.
Yeah, I know, but I've already said it to Dunny, and he didn't disagree with me, so that's why I'm allowed to throw it out there. So I think
Dunny's too modest. Dunny's too modest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, true. Well, not with me. He's not. You can. But no, look, I just think he's on the right road. That's what I mean. It's a long way to go.
Sure.
No, I know what you mean.
And I think he's playing in the Premiership. He got a little bit of luck. There was a sending off, and he got back into the team, and he's stayed in it for the last 4 or 5 games. Look, I think we've got a couple of young players. Like in Ireland, we sit here, and I can see, like, hear sometimes of Gary's voice, a bit of frustration with the way we do commentary around things. Like we sit here, and everyone is like, Malumbi has to play. He has to get into the team. He has to play. But Alan Brown would play more than Malumbi in the Preston team. And people don't really see that in Ireland because it's not in the Premiership. It's not on your screens. But Alan Brown is well ahead of where Malumbi is. But we don't see that. And we look at Malumbi and we think, we've seen him for the 21s. I think he should be playing for the international team straight away. And he's still a long way to go on the road of becoming a recognised centre midfielder. Even, yes, he's playing regularly enough Championship. But the next step in being a Premiership centre midfielder is huge for him.
Yeah.
So I understand that these young players need time and we need to be patient with them. And you could actually argue that a lot of people didn't know who Jason Knight was 6 months ago, but people in the game knew he was exciting. You look at how much he was playing for Derby. You look who backed him, like Philip Cocu and now Wayne Rooney have really backed him and top names in football. So you could argue he's actually ahead of Malumbi in terms of playing time. So it's all changing, and it's rapidly changing with these young players, and we've got to find the best balance with them.
Yeah, well, listen, fellas, it's we could keep talking for ages. There's loads in this. Prediction time. I know it's difficult, Gary, without seeing the Irish team in particular and the Serbian team and how they're going to go about their business. So a lot of unknowables here. But what's your sense for tomorrow night then?
I'm positive. I kind of always am. And people say about the fact that there's no crowd there tomorrow on Wednesday, there's no crowd there. And that's a bonus for us. I kind of look at the other way, Joe, because I've played in them games and they're hostile and the crowds are there. But when you play against that part of Europe, those guys, they're quite temperamental. I know it's a stereotype, but they're quite temperamental. And when the crowd's there, bearing in mind that they're still smarting about that playoff loss to Scotland, if it was to slightly go away from them, the crowd would be on them straight away. They could do something. There could be a sending off. I think tomorrow, though, they'll be calm. They'll be collected. There'll be none of that. So I think it kind of goes against us a little bit, that.
Yeah, interesting.
But I certainly wouldn't. I've never felt that Ireland players get fazed by big crowds. I think we actually enjoy it. I think we thrive with it, really. It's a great environment to play in. So I think that's a negative for us, to be perfectly honest, tomorrow. But I think I'm going there thinking we're organised. I think there's a lot of confidence within the group. Even though the results don't show that, I think they're on the right path. I hope they believe in it. And I genuinely believe that it's not easy to put an Ireland team away. I know the results ain't been great, but it ain't easy to put an Ireland team to bed. And I'm just hoping that we can get it right. I feel that we will look after the ball. I think we have to. I think the out ball could be a centre forward who runs in behind, because more than anything, as Vinny says, it's not about that he gets on the end of the ball. Shane Long. It's that he makes their defensive unit drop back.
Yeah.
And that relieves the pressure for you as the defender in the Ireland team. Do you get a little bit of a breather, you get up the pitch? Now, if they go with Collins and he holds the ball up, you're hoping that they relieve the pressure that way. But the reality is, as a defender for Ireland, you won't be able to get up the pitch. You'll still be back on the edge of your box, which is uncomfortable. So Joe, you know me, my heart will rule my head a little bit, but I'm hoping, praying that we just get a point on the board and just sets us up for the remainder of the campaign, because I know how important that is.
Yeah. Vinny, they'll score 3, we'll score 4. What are you saying?
Yeah, that will be the team talk. No, it won't, obviously, but I'd be in fear of Tadic and Milinkovic-Savic playing with Lazio. I'd be in fear there. So the 2 number 10s, right. I'd be very fearful of them, and if they play Mitrovic up front. But they've got huge options in the forward area. Yeah. I'd be worried that we're going to concede, and then if we're going to concede, where the goal is going to come from. So I'd be concerned ahead of tomorrow. And I think Gary's spot on. I think the empty crowd, like Mitrovic missed the penalty that cost him the European Championships. Imagine he made a mistake, or Shane Duffy nailed them after 2 minutes in front of a hostile crowd. He may just go. So I'd rather there was a crowd there. So I'd have a little bit of fear, but I think they'll go 3-5-2, and hopefully our fullbacks in Coleman and Stevens could cause them some problems.
Fingers crossed. Fellas, great stuff. Gary, always great having you on. Vinny, thanks so much.
Chat to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
See you, boys. That was Gary Breen and Vinny Perth, and it's part of our Paddy Power special here on Off the Ball. With the ACCA Cracker, you can insure your ACCA. If one leg of your 4 legs or more ACCA lets you down, you can get your stake back as a free bet. It's available in all football matches and markets. For information on responsible gambling, visit Gamblingcare.ie. And want to show you this as well. Hopefully we've got more of this on the way. It's the excellent work of Monaghan native Kaylee Trapp. This is brilliant. Have a look at this.
Pogba's left Man United before, and Man United have survived. And if he leaves again, Manchester United will survive. Trust me.
Roy Keane wanted to leave.
I never wanted to leave.
That's why you're not.
No, he just wanted a bigger contract. He wanted a bigger contract.
Never went for a pay rise in my life.
About money. You had the biggest contract at United, you did.
That's because I performed every week like that. And this idea again, he wants to be loved. That's all I talk about.
It's different though. The players are different now. The players are different now. Come on, give me a hug, right? Come on.
Come on, social distancing.
I'm just getting. I always love players when they're playing football with a smile on their face. And even when, you know, a lot of players now are playing like they got the world on their shoulders. They're playing in the best league. I regret the day, you know, I didn't smile every time I was on the pitch, because it's such an unbelievable... What are you looking at there, Roy?
I never like players who smile on the pitch. Too relaxed.
Football isn't fun, Roy.
No. You're there to win, remember.
Yeah, you can win, but you can have a smile on your face.
No, not for me.
Brilliant. At Kaylee Trapp on TikTok is where you can get more of that. So KayleighTrappe at Kaylee Trapp on TikTok. Brilliant stuff, Kaylee from Monaghan. We'll take any of that when you want to send it on. And we've got a TikTok account as well, at @off_the_ball. Surprisingly enough. So at @off_the_ball. Have I said that right? I don't know if I have. I have. Okay. It's easier to see it than say it out loud. So that is us done for the preview with Gary and with Vinny Perth. Up next, we have the crappy quiz. Owen Sheehan is with Nathan Murphy, Phil Egan and Tommy Rooney.
Chris Martin.
Oh, you're kidding me. September.
Kyle Lafferty.
Are you joking me? Is that right? I know, it's not right.
Anybody else?
Leash, was it?
Like, that is one of the most stupid questions.
Darius Vassell? Seriously, you all need to just stay quiet. This is getting really annoying doing this quiz. What is going on here?
Welcome along to the shoutiest segment on Irish radio. It's the scintillating, it's the stupefying, it's the splendido, crappy quiz. Every week we pit 3 of Team Off the Ball up against each other in a no-holds-barred quiz of sporting factoids. This week, in the middle of the week, we've got a football special for you ahead of Serbia versus the Republic of Ireland, and it is all with thanks to Paddy Power. Allow me to welcome today's contestants. Our first contestant today admits he's entered this quiz firmly under the label of third wheel. His trivia record is erratic, and he comes up against two Goliaths of the game. Could this man find his inner David? Well, time will tell. Give it up for the Meath Hillbilly, Tommy Rooney.
Nice to be back. How are you, lads?
Give us your cultural reference there, Phil. What is this like? Who is Tommy in the athletics world?
I was thinking back to 1993. It's Gateshead. Everyone's looking forward to Linford Christie against Carl Lewis. Who's going to be the fastest man on the planet? But John Drummond splits them. John Drummond, notorious fast starter. So it'd be interesting to see how he out of the blocks quickly. It is when Tommy, he actually had a false start that night, but he came second and Carl Lewis came third.
Phil, thankfully this is a football quiz and not an athletics quiz.
Yeah, there we go.
Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, Tommy thought that Linford Christie was a boxer 5 minutes ago, but we've cleared that up. This was an athletics reference that Phil Egan has brought to the table, and a very good start to all involved. Our next contestant.
I definitely didn't.
I just Googled John Drummond, who was obviously part of that legendary time in sprinting, to see what question marks maybe we could hold over John Drummond and then therefore hold over Tommy. And I was quite surprised actually with what came up. So yes, there is a drugs reference, turns out, when it comes to John Drummond, who went on to become Tyson Gay's coach. BBC.com, 2014. Tyson Gay's former coach, John Drummond, banned for 8 years by USADA, was found to have possessed, trafficked, and administered banned drugs to an athlete he coached. So there you go. So that's you, Tommy. That is the comparison we're making.
God.
Wow.
That's that Meath Hill and
can you trust anybody these days?
No, you really can't. Just when you think you know someone, they really let you down. Our next contestant.
Google doesn't forget. Google does not forget.
No, it definitely doesn't. Our next contestant is still visibly shaken after his meltdown on last week's quiz. The Trivia World's version of Brazil going down 7-1 to Germany has put him back in his place. And all the people want to know is if he'll even wake up from his slumber. Give it up for the beast of Ballyhaunis, Nate Dog Murphy.
There was no meltdown. I'm going to very quickly go on to youtube.com/offtheball, where I had widespread support from the YouTubers on there. And to get positive reviews on YouTube, Owen, is quite something. So they clearly felt I was totally screwed over by both yourself and Jared Gilroy. Robert Clark said, fair play to Nathan, he's taking the loss well. Which I thought was fair. I did take it very well. I should have walked out the second he screwed me over with that first question. So I thought that was a compliment for you. What was the round where we played the McElroy stuff? What's that called?
The Ivan Etniage round.
Exactly. Matthew McConnell said it was a thing of beauty. Hope to see it more regularly.
Thank you.
I think it was a great round.
Phil versus Jer versus Nathan versus Adrian and Tommy as a team is what I want to see.
Hilarious.
Botox93 said Murph got done out of it with the first question.
Okay.
D-Mac said Nathan will be back. Hey. Keep the faith.
Hold on.
And Aiden made very good points. He said, while it was funny seeing Nathan sulking, which isn't what happened, if I worked for OTB, I'd be sacked for assault on the first day for punching Jared Gilroy. Which is fair enough. So that's what the YouTubers are saying.
I will agree with Paul's assessment in the YouTube comments. Couldn't write it. Nathan demands Phil to replace Adrian. Is finished with a score of 0 the very next week. Dublin bullying Mayo 2016, 2017, 2020, and now 2021. That is exactly what happened. It was an embarrassment.
Listen, can I just clarify a few things? Because I don't want it to be seen that I'm a bad loser, which I most definitely am not. I'm a rare loser, I think it's fair to say. But I have no issue with Phil winning. I think Phil is a worthy competitor. It's why I wanted him to come in and to test me. My issue is with Gilroy and more importantly with you, because this quiz and its running comes down to you standing up to Jared Gilroy. I was tempted to send a letter to the HR department for live bullying. It's all there on YouTube. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. But at some stage, you're going to have to stand up to Jared and run this quiz the way it's meant to be run.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like maybe one day I'll be able to grow into those shoes. I guess this is just a learning experience for all of us, Nathan. Maybe I will eventually find my voice. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I'll tell you how bad it was. They wouldn't even put it on the radio last Friday night because it lacked legitimacy.
Is actually why it didn't go on the radio. I was there.
Nathan was presented.
That is exactly it.
Nathan was presented. Let's move on.
I was there beside the radio all night. Waiting for my voice to come on the radio, and it just never came, Nathan. And
Well, you didn't have a voice during the quiz, and that was the problem.
Yes, I guess you might be onto something there. Speaking of which, our last contestant today is possibly the greatest Crappy Quiz contestant the Crappy Quiz has ever seen. Such a statement, I'm sure, will be met by consensus with everyone here on the quiz today, and definitely is not something that will quietly make one of his competitors seethe for the next 15 minutes. You can give it up for Phil the Power Egan.
Thanks. I feel like those comments are kind of like what you'd see after United blitz a team 5-0 and then Solskjaer's the man, and then the next week you revert to the norm. So the pressure is on.
Yeah, the norm for you is winning at the moment, the champ, etc., etc., etc. As ever, the format is the classic Crappy Quiz with a series of questions on different themes. Then it's on to the slip and slide of trivia, which is the rapid fire round. You can podcast the Crappy Quiz on otbsports.com or on the OTB Sports app. And if you fancy watching on YouTube as well, give us a thumbs up. And leave a comment on YouTube as well, because clearly Nathan goes through it and that's how he spends his weekends, looking for some sort of validation and reason to keep going with this stuff. Round one is the boring questions round, and it is never a multiple choice. Tommy, while Serbia and Luxembourg are Ireland's main focus in this international window, you could be forgiven for not being able to contain your excitement surrounding the Qatar game. As you know, Xavi's Al Sadd dominated last season's domestic league in Qatar. But can you name the Spaniard who was the star on the pitch for the champions, bagging 11 goals and 8 assists?
This is a bit of an odd one. It's a bit of a tough question to start off on. Roberto Soldado.
No, it's not Soldado. Does anybody know?
So I was going to go for
Soldado's
a weird question.
Was early.
What have I done?
I obviously thought this was a much easier question. Am I the only person who's been following the career of Santi Cazorla?
What?
Clearly I am.
This season or last season?
Last season.
Well, you said this season.
Was Santi Cazorla not playing in Spain last season?
The 2020-2021 season.
Which is over. Look at the confused look at his face. Just look at his face.
What's the issue?
What a strange question.
What the question is, but it's fine. Here, if you got it wrong, move on.
The Qatar season is over. It finished in February, and so that's last season. Santi Cazorla was playing for Al Sadd last season, and
how? Okay, well, look, I'm not going to contest it. I'm just looking forward to seeing how obscure the lads' questions are.
I thought this was a far easier question than it was, I will say. Clearly, it's just me. Question one for you, Nathan. In what qualification campaign did the Republic of Ireland last face Luxembourg in international football?
He asked the Irish commentator.
Euro 92?
No, not Euro 92. Anyone?
You're going back, I'd say. What was the question? Was it World Cup qualifying campaign?
No, any qualifying campaign.
There was definitely early 80s vibe off that. I'm going to say like something like 84 qualifiers.
It was Euro 88. Euro 88, Luxembourg finished bottom of Ireland's group. There you go, 0-0 so far. I guess the value of those questions is the same, thankfully. I feel really bad about giving that question to Tommy now. I genuinely feel a level of guilt that I'm not sure if I can.
Why? It's a quiz. There's no emotion involved. You ask the question, you get the answer right. Unless, of course, you are attaching emotion to the questions and giving certain people easier questions.
Question one for you, Phil. A brand new World Cup qualification campaign means a brand new opportunity for football to come home. Of England's current players, who has the most caps?
Silence.
Current players, okay. So this could be anyone. This could be anyone in the squad.
Correct.
Anyone who hasn't retired.
Hasn't retired. That's a bit of a.
Harry Kane is too obvious. Would it be Jordan Henderson?
Correct. 58 caps for Jordan Henderson. You could have also said Raheem Sterling, who's also on 58 caps. They're the two answers.
But Jordan Henderson isn't in the squad.
That's why I said players who haven't retired. When Phil said current squad, I clarified it. So just to make that clear for everybody. There's already just this tension here in the air today, which I think we just need to dispel. I think everybody. It's 1-0 to Phil.
That was such a weird question I got.
Round 2 is you got to just brush up on your Middle Eastern football. It's as simple as that. Round 2 is the Serbia round. Ahead of tomorrow's crunch tie in Belgrade, this round will test your knowledge on the footballing powerhouses of Serbia. Tommy, which Serbian footballer has made the most Premier League appearances?
There's only two obvious ones. Jeez, how long was he there for?
Who are you thinking about?
Well, Jojo, don't hit the buzzer here now. But obviously, Matic or Vidic are the two in my head. He comes from Serbia.
And sing the song there for the crack.
No, it'll get beeped out. Phil, I haven't. I didn't sing it. I was at the United Liverpool game in 2009, and I was in the Liverpool end. Actually, got my tickets into. I was in Old Trafford. I was in the Liverpool end, and I had to wear my Manchester United jersey under about 3 jumpers, and I had to fake celebrate. Celebrate a goal. Was it a Torres goal? But United won 3-1. But I had to. Yeah, it was a double agent that day. I'm gonna go with. Look, it's a 50-50 for me. I'm gonna go with Vidic.
No,
too obvious, but
it's not Vidic. It wasn't 50-50 either.
Ivanovic, yeah.
It was Ivanovic.
Branislav.
Oh no!
With 273 appearances. Now, in fairness, these next couple of questions are harder for Nathan and Phil. Like what I said a moment ago about being guilty. That was just a moment of panic on my. It was trying to make up.
Nathan's got you. He's got you.
I got myself rattled there. This quiz is completely and utterly fair. Looking at it now, this is a tough question. Nathan, can you give me Serbia's group opponents at the 2018 World Cup?
Australia?
Yeah.
Wrong straight away.
Denmark?
Australia.
They were in a group with Brazil.
Yeah.
Switzerland.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the other team. There was...
You're going back one World Cup too far, Nathan. Australia were in their group the previous World Cup they qualified for.
So Switzerland, I'm trying to think, because obviously the Switzerland-Serbia game, there was the whole celebrations, wasn't there?
Yeah.
With Shaqiri. Yeah, Brazil.
One more you're missing.
Was Brazil drew with Switzerland?
The answer is Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Great bunch of lads.
Great bunch of lads. Phil, can you name the last Serbian footballer to play in a Champions League final and win it?
Okay, our buddy Ivanovic didn't play, as Jeff Shrees told him he wouldn't be playing. I'm gonna go with Dejan Stankovic for Inter Milan.
Correct. 2-2.
Did Kovacic not play for Madrid in the final?
Yeah, well, he is Croatian.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
I'll tell you, Tommy,
there you go, boys.
Walking down the streets of Belgrade.
Thank God I'm not yet.
England's Tommy Rooney. I'll tell you, they're not like that.
Apologies to all my... yeah, okay.
Round 3 is the disappointments of past campaigns round. We all know that Ireland are going to saunter through Serbia and Portugal and qualify for Qatar 22. So to keep our feet on the ground, here's a round of questions on some of the more disappointing World Cup qualification campaigns in recent memory. Tommy, who finished top of Ireland's qualification group for the 1998 World Cup? Which I'm sure Nathan and Phil will agree is an absolute gimme.
Oh, it definitely is a gimme for the lads. Oh, lads, this is a stinker for me today. 98, Belgium.
No. What did you say?
Home playoff. What am I?
It was Romania.
Romania.
Jesus.
We drew with them, didn't we? Remember Cascarino scored against them, Lansdowne.
Did we play Belgium in that qualification campaign, no?
No, the playoff.
Oh.
Nathan, The 2006 qualification campaign was a battle royale between France, Switzerland, Israel, and the Republic of Ireland. But can you tell me who scored the most goals in that group? Was it A, Jibril Cisse, B, Yossi Benayoun, or C, Alexander Fry?
So he gets a multiple choice.
He does.
There weren't a huge amount of goals in that group.
It's a much harder question, though, than who was top of the qualification group.
I was barely even born in 98.
True.
Alex Fry.
Correct. He's off the mark. Alexander Fry, yeah, top scorer in that group that year. Phil, question 3 for you. Who was the first Denmark player to score against Ireland in the infamous hammering in 2017?
This is ridiculous.
Something that happened like 2 years ago.
This is such a weird quiz.
But it's 4 years ago this year.
Well, it's not. Yeah, in November, so 3.5 years ago.
It came from a corner. Was it Christensen? Anders Christensen?
Is he right, Tommy?
Yes.
No, but it's easier.
He is right.
Yes.
Christensen.
Come on, that's such an easy question.
Christensen got the
It's not
score.
really. It's known as the Christian Eriksen game, to be honest.
Yeah, but Poulsen and Christensen
Andreas
scored the
Christensen
other two
scored
goals.
one goal ever for Denmark.
No, it's
the other. Name the other goal scorer then, Tom.
God, the misery of naming.
Eriksen hat-trick.
Really
Yeah.
would.
Christensen.
Yeah.
And the fifth goal,
Bentner.
Nicholas Bentner. Yeah.
Yeah, but Tommy wouldn't have got that. You got it. It was a penalty.
I said Bentner. I said Bentner there. You just said it.
Yeah, after Tommy said.
We'll move quickly on to round 4. The misery of Nathan here is actually getting a little bit contagious, and it is bringing down the whole tone of this quiz. But I hope you're still with us. We move on to round 4, which is the fun-free magic number round. Contestants
All fun-free on.
Get 3 points for getting the number exactly right. If no one manages that, the nearest contestant who doesn't go bust gets 2 points, and the second closest gets 1 point. I'm going to say that we can only accept the answer that's written on your paper. I'm also going to have to ask for your pens once the music ends. So if you don't mind, give us the following number. The number of players who have scored more than 1 career goal for the Republic of Ireland at a World Cup finals, plus the number of times Luxembourg have qualified for a major international tournament, plus the number of goals Ireland have scored under Stephen Kenny so far, plus the number of appearances Caoimhín Kelleher has made for Liverpool this season. Your 30 seconds expire when Sinatra sings Bright Shiny Beads. So we have got the number of players who have scored more than once for Ireland at a World Cup. We've got the number of times Luxembourg have qualified for a major international tournament. That's the World Cup or the Euro. Plus the number of goals Ireland has scored under Stephen Kenny so far. Obviously not including the penalty shootout. Plus the number of appearances Caoimhín Kelleher has made for Liverpool this season. Can we get your pens down, please? Tommy, what have you got?
8.
Phil?
7.
Nathan?
7.
The answer is 7.
I think it's 7. Ah.
The answer is 7. So Nathan and Phil both get 3 points for their work on this one. So the number of players who have scored more than 1 goal for the Republic of Ireland World Cup finals is just 1. Robbie Keane's the only man to have done it. The number of times Luxembourg have qualified for a major tournament is 0. Ireland have scored 1 goal under Stephen Kenny so far. And Tommy, the Manchester United fan, isn't maybe as clued in as Premier League commentator Nathan Murphy and Premier League expert Phil Egan on the fortunes of Liverpool this season. Caoimhín Kelleher has made 5 appearances for them. 2 in Europe, 2 in the league, 1 in the FA Cup, which brings your total to 7. Nathan, that brings your total to 4 points. Phil, you are on 6 points. Tommy, you are trailing behind on nothing, but still time, Tommy. Still time.
Did Phil get all 3 questions right, yeah?
He's got every question correct so far.
Wow. Fair play, Phil.
Thanks,
God.
Thanks a lot.
Our winner tonight will be decided in the round that separates the men from the boys, the Stephen Kennys from the Kenny Rogers. It's no team in particular, ridiculously easy rapid fire round. The score you get in this round will be added to your score in the previous round, and there will be 40 seconds for everyone to answer from the same set of questions. We're going to start with the person with the highest number of points, that's Phil, then onto the person in second, that's Nathan, and then onto the person in last. If you get a question correct, I keep asking you questions until you get one wrong, and once you get one wrong, move on to the next person, and you get deducted 1 point. Phil Egan, are you ready?
Yeah.
Your 40 seconds starts now. True or false? Lionel Messi is the top all-time scorer in the Champions League.
False.
Correct. What club does James Collins play for?
Luton.
What country does Hakim Ziyech play for?
Morocco.
Correct. What was Stephen Kenny's first senior job in management?
Longford.
Correct. Name the current Longford town boss.
Pass.
Darragh Doyle. Name either of the players who missed penalties for Ireland against Slovakia last week. Correct. Who was hosting the 2026 World Cup?
USA, Mexico, Canada.
Correct. In what city did the 1976 European Championships final take place?
Paris.
No, Belgrade. Name the Serbia manager, Tommy.
Stojkovic.
Correct. What team did Ireland last score a goal against in normal time? Bulgaria.
Back down to 0.
Bulgaria. Phil Egan, by the skin of your teeth you held on there. You got screwed over by 1976, Nathan. Phil, I mean, what can we say anymore about Phil Egan? This is how many in a row?
I don't remember.
1976, that was Puskas, wasn't it?
I think so.
Not the Panenka, sorry, the Panenka, not the Puskas. It was the Panenka, wasn't it?
I have no idea, to be quite honest with you.
I think I'll stick with Owen. I think I'll stick with the Europa League. I'll be honest. When you asked me to do the quiz this week instead of the football one, I thought, there'll be 10, 15 people in it. I'll just hide in the background. I didn't realise it was up against these two powerhouses. So, I'll slip off here into the background.
Oh, there's a malaise in the camp of Nathan Murphy at the moment. You can hear us. So you just need to get out of your phone.
I know. I'm frustrated again at the level of questions given to fabulous Phil Egan and the straightforward nature of the rapid fire ones. But listen, he was a deserving winner. He was a deserving winner. So well done to Phil. I look forward to taking him on next time.
Phil, final word to you.
I'm just glad I'm not a bad champion. Because
you are a killing machine, Phil Egan.
Yeah, but all good
Show
things.
me a bad champion. I'll show you. Have you ever got a question on this, Phil, that hasn't been a football question?
I know.
Oh, plenty.
It's the narrative. It's all about the narrative.
You know, this quiz is a football quiz. This one.
Oh, this one I know, but I've never heard you not get a football question.
He gets boxing questions sometimes as well.
Okay.
Certainly does. This was a football quiz. It was a special one with Paddy Power. The good news is that we're going to be back with the regular crappy quiz this Friday, where Nathan will once again try and maybe fail to take his crown back off the champ.
Put me back.
Who's the third? Who's taking on myself and Phil?
Put me in, coach.
Check that on.
Oh no.
See you next time.
The Paddy Power Half Hour on OTB Sports. Minimal contact in stadiums. That shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Now you're welcome along to the Paddy Power Half Hour. This is the OTB PP special as we look ahead to Ireland versus Serbia in the World Cup qualifiers tomorrow night. Nathan Murphy made his debut on the show on Friday, and even after that humiliation in the crappy quiz, he has joined me on the line. Nathan, how are you getting on?
Well, I think I pretty much nailed it last Friday. I was watching the matches over the weekend saying, yeah, tip after tip, just rolling in until Arsenal came back against West Ham and broke my heart.
Yeah, it was looking as if Arsenal were actually going to be going 3-3 with another West Ham OG, but unlikely. So Paddy Power himself is also on the show. Paddy, how are you getting on?
I'm doing great, and how are you getting on?
Yeah, not bad. But Stephen Kenny now, I don't know if he passed out a burial ground on his way home or if it was a funeral he passed out, but the squad just keeps getting worse and worse. His luck when it comes to these games has been absolutely rotten. Ruled out for this game: Kelleher, Randolph, John Egan, Kevin Long, James McCarthy, Callum O'Dowda, Conor Hourahan and Adam Ida. Aaron Conley travels, as does James McLean, but they're undercooked, as Stephen Kenny said himself today. Nathan, going into these games, I know there's going to be Kenny haters out there already ready to pounce and say that we're making excuses, but this is really getting beyond excuses at this point.
It's a results business, baby. He's got to turn up no matter who's there, but he hasn't been helped once again by the sheer amount of injuries as much as anything else, and also the fact that there's very few players putting their hands up over the last 4 or 5 months. It's not quite at the level it was, I think, in autumn. You look at the calibre of players that are there, and he can still put out a decent team against Serbia tomorrow night, but he just can't seem to get any sort of momentum. They have little or no time on the training pitch. They get a couple of half sessions in before they play the match. So if you're trying to transform Irish football, and that's what it has been built up to, maybe overly so, it's hard to do that in the space of 48 hours with half the squad that you expected to be there. But I do think, looking at that potential 11 that he will put out, there's still enough there to go and get a result tomorrow night.
Paddy, when it comes to these international breaks and the starting 11, how important is that when you're pricing up these games? Because, you know, international football these days seems to be quite low scoring, and not knowing the team, especially with Ireland's squad look in terms of COVID times, how difficult or what goes into that thought process?
Well, when you're talking about Ireland games, they tend to be very low scoring, to be fair, especially in recent times. But yeah, I mean, look, it is important, but right now I guess it's even more tricky than usual, as it is for fans as well as bookies trying to price it up. But like, you heard stories during the week of Serbia and a few players going to be missing COVID or failing COVID tests and stuff like that, so they were going to be down a couple of players. You think, that's positive, and then we get the squad news now, so it's a bit all over the shop, to be honest. But I guess that's just how it is. You just got to get on it and react as and when. The odds may have changed on the back of the thing. I mean, Ireland are still outsiders, are 5-1 to win the game away. Serbia are 4-7. I can't see them shortening much tighter than that. But yeah, look, it remains to be seen. They're probably not world beaters themselves, but we certainly aren't either.
Let's get into the starting 11 then, Nathan, because I know Gary Breen and Vinny Perth touched on this as well. We'll start from the back. Mark Travers is going to start in goal. Stephen Kenny confirmed that today. He's making a big step up in terms of his international career. He has played a couple of senior appearances for Bournemouth, and when he's out on loan as well. But I suppose the main person I want to focus on is Darragh O'Shea, because he has made a breakthrough with West Brom last year and again into the Premier League this year. Shane Duffy is not even playing for Celtic at this point, and when he was playing, he wasn't playing well at all. It surely is a no-brainer for me in terms of bringing Darragh O'Shea straight into the starting lineup instead of Shane Duffy. But again, that little bit of Irishness, I think, in terms of picking players on reputation ahead of form, just seems to be in the back of my mind here. Is Darragh O'Shea good enough for international level in terms of World Cup qualifiers, trusting him in one of the biggest games Ireland have played in years, or would you go with Shane Duffy?
I don't think there's any question that Darragh O'Shea is ready for a game of this calibre. He's playing in the Premier League every single week. He's put in decent performances against Manchester City, against Arsenal, backs to the wall performances against Liverpool, and he stood up. You're right about experience, and is it an Irish thing or is it just international football where, again, because the managers don't get much time with the players, you go with the tried and trusted? Ironically, Stephen Kenny probably knows more about Darragh O'Shea than he does about Shane Duffy, because O'Shea was such an important player for him at the 21s. He played at centre-back in pretty much every game alongside Conor Masterson. And also he played a lot of games in the autumn, all over the place. Played left-back, centre-back, right-back, played really well in the last game. At right-back was bombing forward. So I don't think Kenny will have any doubts. And everything we've seen and heard from Darragh O'Shea suggests he has the personality to be ready for a game like this. The concern for Kenny defensively is that when we were talking about a new era and maybe a more progressive style of football, it was all based on an assumption that defensively Ireland would remain rock solid, as they've been, with a couple of notable exceptions, under Mick McCarthy and by and large under Martin O'Neill as well. And Stephen Kenny spoke about that. He felt that his first choice back four was probably among the top 10 back fours in all of European football at an international level. But Ireland have looked ragged at times at the back, and obviously don't look like scoring at the other end. So the first thing they need to do tomorrow is get back to a away performance at the back, not take any risks, not take any mistakes. And I think Seamus Coleman being back may influence Kenny's decision when it comes to Duffy, because the reason for putting Duffy in would be international experience, particularly with Randolph not being there, with the likes of Howard and the missing in midfield. But you've got Seamus Coleman, you've got Ciarán Clark, who might have only 34 caps, but he's been there for a decade at this stage, and you've got Enda Stevens. You've got experience everywhere else that there's no reason they can't bring Darragh O'Shea through that game. So it's a big call to leave out Shane Duffy. I feel very sorry for Shane Duffy with what he's been through over the last year. He obviously had some personal issues with his dad passing away, and his dad was his biggest fan, went to every single game, and He makes his dream move to Celtic. That doesn't work out. And all of this is on his shoulders as he's losing his place for his club and may lose it for his country. And remember, Shane Duffy has been the man for Ireland for 4 or 5 years. So I don't think we should write that off instantly because of a few bad months at Celtic. But at the same time, I still think Stephen Kenny probably will go with the players who have a little bit of form in Darragh O'Shea, who's in the relegation zone, and Ciara Clark, who's just outside the relegation zone.
Yeah, look, the Shane Duffy one's an interesting one because Ireland's a completely different prospect to what Celtic is. Because, for example, like I've broken down a lot of Shane Duffy this year, and his performances under a microscope weren't great, but there's underlying issues with the Celtic squad as well. The likes of Jeremy Frimpong, who was playing at right back beside Shane Duffy, he was nowhere to be seen. He was essentially just playing as a winger, the same as Liverpool. And then you've got covering players like Scott Brown trying to make up the ground. So Shane Duffy was almost trying to do the job of 3 players at times. Granted, he didn't do them well, but at the same time, you do have to take that into account. Ireland's defence has looked a bit ragged under Stephen Kenny so far, but at the same time, looking back at his results, we're not scoring many goals, but we're not actually conceding that many either. The games that we've lost 1-0. We're drawing a lot of games 0-0. The England game is the exception with a 3-0 defeat. In terms of Mark Travers, Paddy, how much does that influence the price for Serbia to score? Because they've got a lot of firepower up front, and Mark Travers is coming in for one of the biggest games of his career here.
Yeah, well, funny, to give you a context, so it's 130, so 3 1/3 to 1, 130 for Ireland to keep a clean sheet. So that means it's about 5s on for Serbia to score. But bear in mind, if you want some straws to clutch at, the last time the goalkeeping baton was passed from Shay Given to Darren Randolph, that was in 2015, and that was in the game against Germany. And not only did Randolph keep a clean sheet, but he also had an assist with Shane for that Shane Long goal, didn't he? So it might. I'm not saying that's going to be the answer to our prayers, but let's not give up hope too much. Sometimes in crisis situations like this, you can grow a leg.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking at positions for Ireland, the strength and depths. A couple of years ago, you would have said we're absolutely set for the next 10 years with Mark Travers and with a couple of other players coming through. But they're like Kieran O'Hara, their careers just haven't petered out the same way that you would have expected them to a couple of years ago. It's sort of similar with another couple of the younger players that are coming through. In terms of the midfield, again, you have this underlying theme of experience versus form. For me, Josh Cullen, who's playing for Anderlecht, 19 times he's played in a top league in Europe, he surely needs to start this game. And I think Hourahan being injured makes it a little bit easier for Stephen Kenny to make that decision. Is it going to be a midfield 3, Nathan? What are you thinking?
I think it'll be a midfield 3 that might end up reverting to a midfield 5 when we don't have the ball, which would be standard practice for big away games in Europe. Much like the attacking 3, he has a lot of options. They're all of a similar caliber. The frustration is that nobody has put their hand up over the last 4 or 5 months to Stephen Kenny saying, you've got to pick me. With the exception of Conor Hourahan, who's out injured. There's nobody when he picks his team today or tomorrow morning and announces it that can be knocking down the manager's door saying, I'm not happy about this, because unfortunately they haven't had enough chances at club level to prove themselves. He may well go for Cullen. Cullen is the beneficiary, I think, of being out of sight. So while, yes, we may watch parts of Belgian games and at the weekend watch him for 10 minutes before he gets sent off, I don't want to say a myth because it'd be very harsh on Josh Cullen to say it's a myth because he's done well when he's played for Ireland. But it almost feels like there's an exoticness to Josh Cullen now because he's playing with Anderlecht, whereas players playing in the Championship are arguably playing at not far off the standard that Josh Cullen is playing
I wouldn't say that, in fairness. Like you're talking about a team that plays in European football. I know they're not doing that well this year, but I mean, I think we look down on these teams too much. Anderlecht are a European team. They do not play Championship style football. They do not play Championship level football.
Do they not? The Belgian league isn't one of Europe's top leagues.
Burnley, for example, finished in the Europa League.
Would I prefer a player to play for Burnley or to play for Anderlecht? Which is a higher standard? Without question, Burnley.
But this is the question, though, Nathan, because Burnley got to the Europa League and they got their arses tanked. So are they better than teams that were playing in Europe?
I would say they're of a similar standard, if not better. And they're playing against better players every single week. So if you're Robbie Brady, you're playing against a far higher standard of player every week than Josh Cullen is at Anderlecht. Yes, it may suit if Ireland are a team who want to get on the ball playing for one of the best teams in a foreign league, because actually that's what he is getting to go and do there. Whereas, at Burnley, it's obviously a more industrial style that Sean Dyche likes to go with. And I would definitely encourage Irish players to go and spread their wings and go around Europe. But I don't think just because he's playing at Anderlecht, he's necessarily playing at a massively higher standard than some of the other midfielders in that squad. Because he's playing at Anderlecht, is he a better option than a Jason Malumbi or a Jason Knight? I'm not convinced, because I'm sure they could also go on Anderlecht if the opportunity came up. So I wouldn't have an issue with Cullen starting in midfield at all. I think when he's come on for Ireland, he's done well. Kenny obviously likes that player at the base who'll just keep things ticking over. Mm-hmm. But I don't think, much like the other 5 or 6 contenders, any of them have done enough really to say, I've got to start. With the exception maybe of Jason Knight, but he doesn't have any experience at international level. And it's probably Knight or Malumbi for that midfield.
So who's making up the 3 then?
I think Cullen, Hendrick, and either Knight or Malumbi. I still think he'll play Jeff Hendrick. I think Jeff Hendrick's done very well for Stephen Kenny so far. He's never going to be the player people want him to be, but he's still as good as we've got. And I think he brings a good energy level. He has connected the midfield and the attack very well in matches so far. So I wouldn't have a problem starting Hendrick. And also he brings a little bit of experience in there. Maybe Knight has gone ahead of Malumbi because Malumbi hasn't been playing for Preston. But it's not a midfield that is really going to strike fear into the hearts of the Serbians.
Yeah, let's talk about Serbia, because a lot of the talk around them has been based upon their Euro form and their failure to qualify for that. But if you look at their squad objectively, and especially with a new manager coming in, Luka Jovic playing for Eintracht Frankfurt, 3 goals in 11 appearances. Dusan Vlahic has 12 goals in Serie A this year. Milovinkovic-Savic, 6 goals Serie A. Dusan Tadic, 13 goals, 12 assists for Ajax this year. Grucic playing in midfield, obviously previously at Liverpool. 6 times he's played in the Champions League this year. And then Filip Kostic, again, playing up front for Eintracht Frankfurt, 4 goals this year. That's a hell of a lot better than our squad at the minute in terms of form.
Yeah, you look at the Serbian squad, there's any amount of talent there. They haven't shown it, though. Remember, they were beaten by Scotland in a playoff just months ago. They have a new manager in place, a legend in Dragan Stojkovic, so maybe he can make a direct impact. He's certainly talking a good game and talking up playing a free-flowing attacking style of football against Ireland's British style, counter-attacking football. But they have to go and deliver, because they are the great underachievers of European football. They've had ridiculous success at underage level, winning underage World Cups, but we haven't seen that transfer to the senior squad at all yet. They didn't qualify for the Euros. They've never qualified for the Euros. The few times they get to the World Cup, they've never delivered there. So on paper, yes, this is a Serbian side that are far better than this Irish squad, but they haven't shown it when it's actually mattered on the pitch. So I think that's what gives Ireland some hope. And in terms of the longer term group, and trying to progress and finish inside the top 2 and get a playoff, at least we all expect that Portugal, with the quality they have, will win this group. Because it's 8 games, if Ireland could go and take something tomorrow night, Serbia have Portugal straight after that, then they've got Azerbaijan. There's not a huge amount of time for Serbia to get back if it's a slow start, which may well work in Ireland's favour. Likewise, flip that, if Ireland were to lose tomorrow night, it's a very long way back, because you're looking at those Serbian and Portuguese games probably knowing you're going to have to win one of them.
Yeah, this is the Paddy Power special here on Off the Ball. We're looking ahead to Ireland's clash with Serbia tomorrow night in Belgrade. With Paddy Power's ACCA Cracker, you can ensure your ACCA. If one leg off your 4 legs or more ACCA lets you down, you can get your stake back as a free bet. It's available on all football matches and markets. For information on responsible gambling, visit Gamblingcare.ie. Paddy, obviously goals is the main thing that we're going to be talking about here when it comes to Ireland, because they are not scoring many. What's the market saying in terms of this game? Because surely the safe money is putting it on low scoring, but also you're not probably getting your money's worth in terms of what you're getting back.
Well, funny you say. I just on Nathan's point there about trying to get a result. I was talking to Mick McCarthy last week, as I massively drop a name, but I was asking him about saying, if you were managing the thing, would you prefer to be playing Luxembourg first rather than Serbia first to try and get a win under your belt? And saying, obviously, you would. And he was there, no. I can't do his accent, but and he was saying that actually, when if some of his successful qualifying campaigns, they always start off with a difficult away game, and you just manage to get yourself a draw, just get yourself a point, and it's massive. So, it's an opportunity there, I think, to try and catch Serbia cold as well, and just try and get out there and keep it tight and all that. But anyway, you asked me about scoring goals, and hopefully we'll be talking about some Ireland goals. But it's 7 games since we scored a goal, isn't it? So it's 11-10 that we score a goal in this match against Serbia, which I can't say I'll be that excited about those odds, to be honest with you. Based on our recent record, probably will be low scoring, dragging us back to the glory days of low scoring Italy 90. I'm old enough for that, but I think it's unlikely we'd be scoring for fun. But 11-10 that we'd score a goal against Serbia. Can't say I'll be biting your hand off for that one, to be honest.
Yeah, one thing that generally comes up on the Paddy Power half hour on a Friday is that maybe the goal scorer is a better bet in this. Do you think that Serbia will score, or is that something that people could look at?
Well, Serbia are very likely to score, but the no goal score is a good shout. It's going to be around a 5-1 shot. I'm going to check for you when I'm chatting to you. It is 6-1. They're even better. So about 6-1 for no goal score. That could be a shout. That's a good result for us, isn't it? If we get away with a 0-0 draw, you'd bite your hand off, wouldn't you?
Yeah, as Mick McCarthy, your pal, would say, he would have bitten your hand off for a 0-0 result against Serbia in the opening day of World Cup qualifiers. Nathan, the front three, it's impossible to choose, but also at the same time, I'm not sure it makes all that much of a difference who goes in there, because nobody is really scoring, nobody's really on form, and we just need to sort of pick up a spark somewhere, but it's hard to know where that's going to come from.
Again, it's not as though Aaron Connolly and Callum Robinson or Shane Long or James Collins are coming into this and Stephen Kenny saying, I have to start you because you're in a blistering run of form. Callum Robinson hasn't played a game for West Brom in a couple of months at this stage. Shane Long has dropped out of the Bournemouth side over the last few weeks. James Collins has dropped out of the Luton team. And Aaron Connolly is carrying an injury and hasn't exactly set the world alight in the Premier League. I think he's a real threat, but in terms of goal scoring, unfortunately, it hasn't really happened for him this season. So you are looking for things to fall into place. What gives hope is the performance against Slovakia, where Ireland should have scored several goals, created as many opportunities as Ireland have created in the big game for many a year. So if they can get near that level of performance, they won't be far off tomorrow night. He's got to have options again for that front three. You could potentially play Alan Brown further forward. Will he play Matt Doherty on the right, where he might be down as a bit in the front three, but he'd probably be slightly deeper. But Doherty has looked good in an attacking sense over the last few weeks. We all know about his weaknesses defensively, but if Seamus Coleman is behind him, I don't think you need to worry too much about that. So I wouldn't be surprised away from home if Doherty got the nod on the right-hand side. Connolly, if he's fit, will play. And then it's whether does he play on the left-hand side, or do you play maybe Callum Robinson on the left, cutting in? I thought Robinson was exceptional that night in Slovakia. Hasn't been able to play yet because of all the COVID issues, but showed enough, I think, to Stephen Kenny that he should be in the team. If he doesn't, then he goes with Connolly on the left-hand side. Well, then you're into James Collins, who played last time out in the game against Bulgaria and didn't make much of an impact at all. Or going back to Shane Long once again and hoping that he can have one of those Germany-style nights and nick a goal. And remember the last World Cup qualifying campaign, Ireland did pull off big results away from home. Austria, Wales, even the draw over in Serbia last time out. But they need to find a goal. They just need it to go in off somebody's arse at this stage. It doesn't matter how it goes in. They just need a goal, I think, to relieve all the tension that's around the squad.
Well, that's the other narrative going into this, is style versus results. And obviously Stephen Kenny is always going to be he's going to be judged on the results, but also because he's put such an emphasis on changing the style of Ireland, how do you manage that in terms of these big games that you need to get results? And a part of me thinks that maybe Shane Long is the right man to have in there, because Mark Travers, I remember when he was playing for Bournemouth and as well for the underage Ireland sides, he does have a good passing range. And whether or not you want to abandon your style of football, your brand of football, you don't have to abandon it completely to allow yourself that opportunity to maybe get the ball, hoof it long over the top of the defence for Shane Long to run onto the odd time, and just have that option there if you need to. And looking at the starting 11 or looking at the squad, there's no player other than Shane Long and that provides you that type of player or that type of talent.
I think Aaron Connolly can play that role as well. I think he has that pace to exploit teams in behind. Listen, if you're Dragan Stojkovic and you've said that Ireland are a British side, and what you're talking about sounds like going back to 1990 and having Packy Bonner sending it as long as possible up to Niall Quinn. I don't think that will happen. And it's not one thing or the other. Lots of teams play long ball. Like Liverpool play a huge amount of long balls.
Man City play route one at times.
But they do it because they want to win the second ball. So they know the other centre half is probably going to win the header. But the mentality monsters, as Liverpool used to describe themselves back when they were half decent, you're swarming around the midfield then to win it back in a dangerous position. And Ireland did that really well in the few decent performances they've had under Stephen Kenny. Most of their chances have come on that sort of turnover ball in midfield where they're attacking quickly. There's a good intensity to it. Shane Long has been in and around the squad under Stephen Kenny. He wasn't selected at one stage, then he was injured. So does Kenny, I think if he's looking for that pace in behind option, Aaron Connolly gives him that and gives him probably a whole lot more as well. And maybe Long is the man off the bench.
This is sort of a question that I'm going to throw in randomly, Paddy, but who is Ireland's best player at the minute?
Jesus. It's actually not easy to answer that. I mean, you probably somebody like Seamus Coleman, I guess. But I mean, it's hard. It's a hard question to answer. It doesn't jump off the page at you. It's not like you've got a long list to choose from either. So that's maybe a worry. But maybe this is we are kind of are we in a rebuilding period or some sort of a time of change with the Irish team still? Because with the Stephen Kenny era hasn't really kicked off yet. So maybe we're yet to establish our new legends, I guess, or whatever. And
there's no superstar, is there?
You what?
There's no superstar in the squad at the moment, but I'd be wary of the way they're spoken about at times, as if they've somehow picked their name out of a hat to play for Ireland, that this is the worst group of Irish players there's ever been. Like, that isn't the case. Just look through that potential 11 tomorrow night, where they're playing their club football at an incredibly difficult time to make progress in the game. Maybe our best player at the moment is Seamus Coleman, but Seamus Coleman is right back, generally first choice when he's fit for a team that's pushing for the Champions League this season. The alternative is Matt Doherty, who Spurs just spent a lot of money on. Darrell Shea is one of the youngest centre-halves playing week in, week out in the Premier League. Kieran Clark, vastly experienced centre-half. Enda Stevens last season, one of the best left-backs in the Premier League. There's a lot of quality in that squad. They just need to gel. And while there's a fear of what Serbia have on paper, they face the exact same difficulty as us, which is they have a new manager who got that squad together yesterday, today, who's had no time on the training pitch. You can talk all his wants about attacking football. Could have little or no time to get that across to the players. So I think we need to give this group a little bit of a break at times and show them a bit of respect for what they are doing and what they're achieving by getting to this level. Yes, there's not the superstars of before, but give them a bit of time and put a bit of faith in them. And I think eventually this group will give Ireland plenty of decent days.
Yeah, I was preparing myself to have the argument with you there because I did not think you were going to say Seamus Coleman. But Seamus Coleman's the man. Donegal man. Of course he's the best player in the squad. But in terms of that, yeah, like this squad are going to go through difficult periods, but over the long period of time, hopefully, that Stephen Kenny is in charge, the under 15s, under 16s, under 17s, right up to the 23s in the senior squad, all have this progression plan that are all playing the same football. So it may not be a World Cup, this one coming in Qatar, that Ireland see progress, but it may be the one after that we actually see a lot of what the sort of foundations that are being laid now. That's when we'll hopefully see the results of this period in time. In terms of this game coming up tomorrow night, what's your predictions then, Paddy?
I'm going to be optimistic and go for a 0-0 draw. Well, guys, let's go for a 1-1 draw. So we'll actually score a goal as well, so it'll all be positive. I do think we could get something out of it. Maybe it's blind faith, but I just think early in the competition, nobody's really up to proper sprinting pace, if you like. Like all the squads are just together and everything. So sure, why not? We'll grab a point out of the first away match. We'll hammer Luxembourg 105-0, and then we'll be away in a hack.
Good stuff. Nathan, are you as confident as Paddy?
I went for a 1-1 on OTB AM this morning. I'm surprised, considering Ireland's history away from home, that a 1-1 draw is an odds-on at this stage with the bookmakers. It seems to be the safest possible tip, and I think this time around it would be a very good result. 1-1 away from home, 100%. We would grab it with both hands right now.
I was quietly confident last night that Ireland could get something, and then I looked at Serbia's squad, and I know that they've had a lot of issues, but I just can't get past the fact that our front three going up against the front three that they have, who are scoring regularly in the top leagues in Europe, I'm not 100% confident going into this. So I think we could be actually coming out of this a little bit disappointed. I know that makes me unpatriotic, but that's just what my mind is saying right now. That's us done on the Paddy Power Half Hour. You can watch the Paddy Power Half Hour every Friday at 1:30. It's usually myself, Ger, and an odds compiler from Paddy Power giving us the real insight into the markets. Joe Malloy is up next. He's speaking with Liverpool and Fulham legend Danny Murphy.
The Paddy Power Half Hour on OTB Sports. Minimal contact in stadiums. That shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Now, very happy to chat to our next guest about his career. Currently one of the most tactically astute pundits around. He was the same as a player. 600 plus senior professional appearances in the game. He came through at Crewe, where he made his senior debut at 16 years of age. And then he joined Liverpool at 20. He was there, obviously, 1997 through to 04. He was part of that treble-winning season. Went on to Charlton and Spurs before an Indian summer at Fulham. 5 great years there, captain for that famous run to the Europa League final, amongst other things. 9 caps for England as well. I am, of course, talking about Danny Murphy. Danny, great to have you on. Thanks so much for the time.
No problem at all. How are you?
Very well. I should have added scored the winner against Manchester United about 400 times as well. I presume that comes up.
Yeah, they were special days. Yeah, I do seem to get reminded of those goals more often than any others, strangely enough.
I think it was 01, 02, 04, if I'm not mistaken. That was a bit nuts, that run.
It was crazy, actually. I look back now with great pride, obviously, but the coincidence of it being at Old Trafford all the time, I don't know whether that came from being a Red growing up, a brother who, I had 3 brothers, but one of them was United fan, so my hatred for United grew from an early age. But no, it was a good stadium for me, Old Trafford. I actually made my England debut there as well, and funnily enough, probably one of the most memorable Liverpool games I had at Old Trafford was my second ever start for Liverpool in a 1-1 draw. I don't know if you recall when Michael Owen got sent off in the first half for a silly tackle on Schmeichel. And I ended up getting man of the match, and I played a lot of that game up front on my own. And the only reason I played in that game was because Karl-Heinz Riedler actually pulled his back, getting his bag off the coach on the way to the game. So my memories of Old Trafford and my experiences there started off very positively, and it just carried on. We did take one or two beatings there, but who doesn't in a career, as long as I had. So yeah, it was a special place for me, Old Trafford.
I mentioned with your punditry, you always strike me as somebody who has a leaning towards tactics. And I always enjoy when you're on Match of the Day, for instance, because, look, other pundits might single out a player and show how that player played well or whatever. But with you, I often get an overall sense of tactically how this game was won, lost. That seems to be a leaning that you have. Did you have that as a player?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I started understanding and wanting to understand, I think is the most important thing, tactics at a young age when I was at Crewe. Good coaches there. Dario was a huge influence in that. We used to play in different positions most weeks and really try and start to understand what's needed on different areas of the pitch, and also trying to understand what's needed from others around you. So I was always a thinker. I always was looking at why, asking why, trying to think of ways to change momentums in games or change my own position. I was always querying things. I think some of that just comes naturally. I don't think it's something I set out to do. And then as my career got better and working under some fantastic managers, Julio being another one who was very tactically aware, I advanced my knowledge in being able to, see things, I think. And when you play top-level football for a long time, I think that's an important aspect of your game, is being able to understand when to be positionally right, when to play more free, how to guide others. And it wasn't probably till my Fulham days where I really felt comfortable and strong enough in my own skin to be able to have an influence on others. I had a wonderful relationship with Roy Hodgson, who gave me responsibility on the pitch. Sometimes I'd change things on the pitch with his say-so, swap the wingers or drop a forward back into midfield, whatever it may be. And when I watch football now, it's not something that I have to consciously do. I'm always looking for the tactics. Sometimes it's a bit of a hindrance because when I'm not working, I just want to enjoy the game, and I find myself looking at why are they playing that way? Change this, change that. It's just something I've always enjoyed, and you've got to be careful when you're doing the work I do, not to try and find something tactical that isn't there. Sometimes there's a game where it's just two teams matched up and it's poor, or two teams are just playing free and it's not so tactical. It's just about the endeavour or the quality of the players. But yeah, I appreciate your words on that. I do try and add a tactical element because I think it's important. The viewer sometimes maybe gets to see or gets to hear what isn't obvious.
Crew, obviously in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, which I might come to towards the end of this conversation. But that's fascinating what you mentioned about playing in different positions. That's quite progressive for 1990s, British football. That's almost Ajax model.
Well, it's funny you mention Ajax because when Dario took over Crew and started setting up the youth policy, I think the Ajax model was one they used in many ways. My development there was really good in terms of the coaching I had compared to other clubs. I'd been at Wrexham, Sheffield Wednesday, Aston Villa, Liverpool. And when I went to Crew, it was a whole different ballgame. I'd never had coaching like it. Lots of time with the ball on your own. And then the stuff I'm talking about in terms of developing you as a player, I mean, sometimes it was protecting me. I was obviously a good player. And when I played in the ages up, there's a physical element that you have to be careful of. So I remember playing in the Crew reserves when I was about 15, still at school. And, a lot of ex-senior players, big lads, blokes, men, proper men. I called them proper men when I was a young lad. And Dario put me in. I remember playing, probably 3 or 4 games. He played me as a sweeper. And he said, look, stay out of trouble. When you feel comfortable, come out with the ball, get into midfield, dictate the play, dictate the game, use your passing, stay out of any trouble, don't get involved in... And then when I played in the first team, I started on the left of a 3 up front, then I played as a 10, then I played in a midfield 3, then I played holding role. I played... All these things were educating me while I was on the job, and I didn't really know it. So I was very fortunate to have that guidance, and that club had the foresight, or Dario especially had the foresight to use those techniques and training methods to develop players, because that's what they had to do to fund the club's future.
Wow, that's an incredible grounding. So when you get the move to Liverpool, and I know there was Kenny Dalglish on the phone and you thought it was your mate and you had to hang up on him a few times. So eventually you find your way to Liverpool. I think it's quite interesting to go the way you did. So at Crew for 4 years, and there were a number of promotions, but you're really finding your feet at senior level. To go from Crew to then a Liverpool. I always think of that Danny Welbeck clip when he's a kid and Roy Keane is showing him how to shield the ball. I don't know if you've seen that on YouTube or whatever, but Danny Welbeck was always around Carrington. He was used to that calibre of character and that atmosphere. You probably really noticed the change between a Crew and a Liverpool in the 90s. So what was it about those players at Liverpool? What was it about Liverpool that was different to a Crew, which I'm sure was still full of very good footballers, but it's a different level, obviously?
Well, there's a few aspects. One is obviously everything's better, more well done. The food's better, the training gear's better, the pitches are better, everything's more advanced, and more importantly, the players. A lot of the players at Liverpool were at the top of their game, not evolving players or players on the way down, which is what you got at Crew. So all of a sudden, I was thrown into a set of circumstances where I'm not just only around really tremendous footballers with full of confidence and self-assurance. I'm actually around a lot of footballers who I admired and supported and went to watch, which is a really, really difficult dynamic to grasp. It's one of my first days at Liverpool. I actually be doing some fitness work, and I'd be doing some pitch runs, and I did them with John Barnes. Now, I can't really put into words that for me, because John Barnes was Kenny Dalglish was my first hero, and then it was John Barnes. And here I am at Melwood doing my fitness work and chatting away with a guy I idolised. And I actually think, looking back, it took me a while to feel worthy of being there, rather than a competition winner. I had confidence in my ability, but I certainly don't think I was egotistical or arrogant enough to think I was anywhere near. I felt lesser than those guys. You know, even being in the dressing room, felt nervous. You know, what do you say? What don't you say? And so many of them were good guys, you know, really tried to help us young lads. And I suppose what helped me adapt was that I was very lucky coming into the club at a time when Carragher had just got in the team, Michael Owen, Davey Thompson, Stevie G was just starting to edge into a first team squad and training. So we were all in a bit of a similar position. Mm-hmm. The only difference being is I'd come from that lower league club. So maybe I appreciated it more, but it definitely took me a while to feel worthy.
Yeah, I'll bet. On that first day, do you call him John or Barnesy? What Mr. Barnes?
Well, I obviously called him John at first, and then he was like, no, Digger, call me Digger. But I felt uncomfortable calling him Digger, I have to be honest. It was too familiar, you know. I just wanted to say thank you for even talking to me. But yeah, it's good memories.
So what's Anfield like then? A rocking Anfield as a player when you settle down over the years and you're settled into yourself and in your mid-20s. That must just be difficult to even verbalise when things are going well.
I think one huge advantage for me, and I think other lads feel this as well, is when you've grown up supporting the team and you've been there on the cop, or you've been a season ticket holder, you've been hundreds of games. It's not new. So although there's a different dynamic because you're a player on the pitch, that feeling is, I've had it before, but it was as a fan. And then you have to just channel that energy and that excitement into trying to put in a performance. But I certainly think growing up, going to the game helped my ability to be able to perform at Anfield. I saw a lot of players come in who took a while to adapt to Anfield. People who went on to, people like Steve Finn and Vladimir Smicer, that type of name, tremendous technically gifted players who'd been around, who played high-level football, but really struggled their first year or so to adapt to Anfield because of that atmosphere, that excitement the crowd creates there. So yeah, it's a magical place. It's I don't know if you've been to the game there or you're on a European night or whatever it is. It's people have their own love for their own affinity for their own clubs. I get that, and everyone's got their stories and their memories of going with a dad or their brother, whoever it may be. But that you'll never walk alone, even if you're not a Liverpool fan, on an evening where there's 50,000 in there. It's a special feeling, special feeling.
I remember even Roy Keane in his autobiography said it was a very football savvy crowd as well. They understood what they were watching in a very good way.
Yeah, that's been said about Liverpool supporters for a long time, and I actually think it's true. It's hard sometimes to be objective.
Sure.
When you're a Red, but I do find that the Liverpool supporters, unlike some of the others I played for, were a bit more understanding and got it a little bit more. But I suppose as intelligent football fans watch every team. It's a passionate city. It's steeped in tradition, and obviously one of the things that Liverpool supporters people of Liverpool, that includes Everton supporters, with the tragedies they've had, there's a togetherness there. And once you're part of the family, once you're in it, they'll back you. You know, you might get the odd game or the odd disgruntlement if you're not at it, but generally they're with you, even when it's not going well. There's a lot of support and love around that club. Your time there really just coincides with the Houllier era. You joined in 97, he's there in 1998 to 04. I think a lot of people were struck at the time of his passing when you spoke about him so warmly. Like, it went way beyond just player paying tribute to a manager he had worked under. I mean, it was very, very heartfelt and very sincere, and it's really not overstating things to say he has shaped your life in a massive way, shaped your career, especially in that settling in period. Well, it was after the settling in period, to be honest, that he came to the fore in my life and career. There's two aspects of football management, I think. It's guiding players, educating players from a football perspective, and educating them from a life perspective, you know, a moral compass, if you like, a pathway to living a better life and giving giving your all and doing the right things. He was a very intelligent, caring man who decided, thankfully for me, to show great faith in me. And I suppose at the time, I didn't see it as well as the clarity came after, looking back and assessing with hindsight what he did for me and how important it was, because I can say for sure that without him, I'd have still remained a professional player and probably a Premier League player because I had talent and ability, but he made me understand how to get the best of me and how to conduct myself properly, because I wasn't conducting myself properly. And he maintained consistency with me. He didn't just get me to a level and then leave me. He stayed with me, and he didn't have to show that level. You could argue that's his job, but he went well over and aboard what he had to do as a manager with me.
What would be an example of that, Danny?
Lots of examples of that. I mean, it's about, on numerous occasions there would be. I mean, one occasion I've talked about, which is some things were going on and a few little troubles and things happening away from the field. And unbelievable awareness from Gerard when he pulled me in one day, which wasn't that unusual to pull in and have a chat, say how well you're doing or talk about a game or whatever. But he said to me, you okay? You all right? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And he said, well, you haven't shaved for a week. You didn't say good morning twice this week. You've not trained the same. You're looking a bit scruffy. I'm here. Talk to me. Like, what can I do? What can we do? So I opened up to him about a couple of things and just got the most brilliant, warm response, some help and some guidance with some issues. And I know other players have spoken about that too. And then following it up as well, not just the one conversation, the attention to detail he would give. He would remember birthdays of your children. He would remember, honestly, it wasn't, at the time, they don't seem like big things, but it just makes you feel part of it. It makes you feel wanted. It makes you feel like you want to run through brick walls for him. So, yeah, there was lots of examples. He was a special man.
Looking at your, say, when you really get going and get moving, 1990,000 season, just league appearances, say, to give people a sense of how things were going for you. 23 in 2000, 01 it was 27, 02 36 appearances, 03 36 appearances, player of the season actually in 03, 04 31 appearances. So he gets you in a really great place. Is he hands-on in terms of tactics and listen, go there, do that, do this? He seemed like he was, very on top of that side of the game as well.
He wasn't hands-on as a coach, but he was always watching, and he was the one who dictated what he wanted his coaches to do.
Right.
He was a wonderful talker, the meetings, group meetings, motivating, but yes, very tactically aware. So the messages would come through the various coaches we had over the years of work ethic, communication, good shape, hard to beat, defensively sound. We'd work on positional play. You knew your job under Houllier.
Right. And
where he was really thorough was the opposition. No stone left unturned, actually, to a degree sometimes that annoyed the lads, because it's like, we're playing West Brom, Gaffer, come on. But he was very tactically aware. I mean, the only tiny criticism from him tactically at times was that we did at times feel like we could have let the lead off a little bit. We were very defensive minded, but that is ultimately why we got our success. When you think back to the teams we beat to win the treble that year, with the quality of sides we come up against, we should never have been competing with, really. And that was to do with tactics. So he was, in answer to your question, he was tactically very, very good, but he wasn't a hands-on coach, no. He wasn't a hands-on, but he was there, always watching. He had a presence.
I mean, you're playing as well across this period with some legendary figures, aren't you, really? I mean, you mentioned Barnes, and there's McManaman there, and there's Fowler, and then you're into the Gerrard era, and some kid called Michael Owen comes along and does pretty remarkable things. I mean, that's a lot of talent to be surrounded by. Give us a sense of who made the biggest impressions on you. I know it's unfair to pick out individuals, but you might give us a sense of playing with a Gerrard or playing with an Owen.
Well, first and foremost, my first season there, where I was on the bench a lot and played a few games, it was McManaman and Fowler were the guys I was in awe of. Michael was flying, but Michael I hadn't watched as a fan and looked up to in the same way. Michael was kind of on my journey, just breaking in and setting the world alight. Michael was. I mean, he was phenomenal, but Michael was more. He felt more of a friend, whereas Robbie and Macca were idols to me. And what was amazing with the likes of Robbie and Macca is how integrated they made you feel, and to bring you on board with them. You know, they became friends. Robbie especially, because Macca left, he went off to Madrid, as you know. But with Michael and Stevie, the journey we went on together, it wasn't like I ever sat back and thought, wow, I'm playing with Michael Owen or I'm playing with Stevie G. They were just Mo and Stevie. You know, it was. They were my mates. They were the lads on the journey. We were on it together. It was only later when you look back on your career or when you've left that you think, wow, you know, I miss playing with those two, for example, and Carragher as well. I mean, players like that you take for granted when you're playing with them. You know, you could have a bad game and Michael will score a couple for you and win the game, and you get subbed after 80 minutes and you get a standing ovation because Michael's won the game for you, even if you've played badly. Stevie could drag you out of a hole, you know, on his own. We've seen that many, many times. And Carragher was a brilliant influence on me because he was always behind me, and he was a brilliant talker, Carragher, even from a young age. So I never really looked at them maybe how others did, because they were with me on the journey and they were my mates.
Yes. I guess I'm sure Stephen Gerrard was your roommate, I think. So it's hard to be gazing across at the other bed saying, my God.
Yes, that's very true. And then, to be honest, at times it would be the other way around. It would be I'd be looking down on him, getting sick to death of whatever, you know, he's staying up late watching some whatever, The Office, or like, go to bed, will you? You've got a game tomorrow, you know. Stevie was very grounded. He was just a young lad who enjoyed his football. He didn't understand what he was becoming in that moment. So I don't think he ever, at that time we shared a room and spent so much time together on and off the pitch, I don't think he ever thought about what he was actually becoming.
Right.
And you know, because he was a superstar.
Yeah, incredible. At that period, did the likes of a Carragher and Gerrard, you know, so we're talking 01, 02 into 03 and 04, did they start taking over the dressing room a bit then?
We did.
Who were Danny Murphy's lieutenants?
Well, there was me, Stevie, Carragher and Michael.
Yeah,
we're thick as thieves for a while. You know, that was a solid four who were we became more influential. But do you know what? We were learning as well, because we had the likes of Sami Hyypiä, Dietmar Hamann, Stefan Hancho, Gary Mack come into the fore, and they were teaching us. You know, the reason we succeeded because we weren't egotistical young lads who thought we'd made it. We weren't thinking we were above our station. We weren't allowed to. But with the recruitment the club made and the players Juliet brought in, we found this lovely balance. And the balance was that we were hungry, determined and talented young players with this mix of very professional, talented senior boys who guided us, and they fed off our energy. So it was a really nice balance for a couple of years we had, and it really felt great to be part of it. But that was credit to the management.
Second in the league one year as well. I mean, you could be remembered as just a cup team, but like it was getting very serious there for a time.
We went 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and we were aiming to improve, and we were a bit sloppy actually. A couple of games I think back where we shouldn't have lost, and actually the focus, contrary to belief, was the league. You know, we weren't trying to be a cup team. Obviously, some of the mistakes were made in recruitment, which happens. You know, they took a risk on Juve instead of getting an Elka. I think that was pivotal. I think it's a regret that we didn't understand and realise at the time how close we were that year. We had it in us, and we didn't quite get over the line. But still proud to be part of that squad, even though we didn't quite win the league, because obviously we were coming up at the time against two wonderful sides, weren't we, in United and Arsenal. You have to give credit where credit's due. They were two phenomenal football teams.
Yeah, it was some era. What kind of personality were you then, Danny? Because this period at Liverpool has the potential to be not quite carefree. It can't be carefree because there's always going to be some pressure, but it can be just like thoroughly enjoyable. I've got my other three mates here, similar age, things are going well, manager likes me, I love the manager. You know, there's a lot to love about that, whereas often you can talk to footballers and they can say, oh man, I was just worried the whole time, I was stressed, I was reading what people were saying about me, I was worried, was I good enough? You know, it's your perspective is everything. So how did you find those years in that sense?
The majority of the time I was very happy, very focused, enjoying my work, loving going into work. Wasn't worried or anxious about anything. I was wary and aware of competition for places and the other players, you know, the likes of Nick Barmby, Patrick Berger, Smicer, Gary Mack came in, Redknapp was already there. There was a lot of midfielders, you know, Jufi came in. A lot of people who were playing in similar positions. So I was aware of the competition, but actually the majority of my time was just feeling very confident and comfortable in my own skin. I was probably at some points too comfortable. A couple of spells I look back where I dropped my levels. I was probably in a comfort zone. Julio talked to me about that a couple of times and I didn't heed his warnings. You know, being in a comfort zone means that you're a bit too comfortable in playing in your surroundings. You start thinking you're a little bit better than you are. You're not putting quite the same graft in at training. You start getting a little bit cocky because you've had some success. That happened a couple of times, and that was due to feeling part of it. That was due to being in a good place. So yeah, it was a wonderful time in that respect. Right. There wasn't. You didn't have the social media aspect then either, you know, that concern you're talking about people judging your every game and every move.
Yeah. It's amazing in football, there is no stability. So just like that, a man called Rafa Benitez rocks up. And I hadn't realised he was so... I mean, you can pick a euphemism here and say honest, but like he was straight to you. It ain't happening here. You're never going to be in my first 11. I'm bringing in some guys. I think Alonso and Garcia's arrival was imminent. And he said, even if you get in the odd time, you're not going to be in the team for a sustained run. Just like that. And I mentioned you were player of the season in 03 and probably peak years. So, I mean, that's devastating.
Yeah. But I have to take some responsibility myself. It took me a long time to do that in terms of I still had a choice. It felt like I wasn't given a choice, but I did have a choice. And I should have had more belief in myself. The big dilemma I had was I'd always felt wanted by Julio. I'd always felt cared for, you know, appreciated.
It's hard to give that up.
Yes. And then, of course, I had other managers who wanted me, making me feel that way. And then I had the Spanish manager who'd come in who I didn't know. I'd worked with him for 6 weeks, and I actually thought we'd started getting on. I'd started playing well in some of the pre-season games. He actually did an article in one paper praising me, would you believe?
Okay.
And then I had this guy in front of me saying, you're done, basically. And it took me a while to say, well, he gave me his honesty and he gave me his choice, and then I had mine to make. And I should have stayed. And then if a year later I hadn't played and he was right, I could have left then.
Yes.
I suppose ultimately I didn't have enough belief in myself that a year later of not playing would have put me in a position to be able to get the clubs who were after me and the contracts that were being put on the table. Maybe that was part of it, but people think I've got this, the man who lets you go from the club you love, you're always going to have some bitterness towards, but it's gone. I understand football better now. Rafa's a tremendous manager, did a great job at Liverpool, and I was a casualty of a new manager coming in. You know, I've shook his hand since, I've met him since. It is what it is. I tell you what I did. I do think now is that takes a strong manager, to be honest, with someone like me who loved the club and grown up loving the club. And I'd rather that, looking back, than someone who tells you something to your face that isn't true just to try and then goes behind your back and does something else. So there's some respect there for him and the job he did at the club. But yeah, it was a devastating moment because I never saw it coming. You never do.
I know you went to Charlton, and I know you especially enjoyed your first year at Charlton. But do you remember watching the 05 Champions League final? You know, behind the couch, hands on your head, or was it okay, or do you even remember?
Do you know what? I do remember. I watched it on my own.
See, that doesn't sound good for a start.
I like watching football on my own anyway.
Okay, the tactics again.
Just to focus. I can't be doing people chatting to me while I'm watching it, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember Franny Jeffers, who was at Charlton at the time. He was Everton money. He was texting me through the first half, and I was gutted for the lads, you know, who were friends of mine, because I knew how desperately they wanted it. And then I suppose at the end of the game, when the celebration started, it was the first moment in the evening where I was struggling a bit with it, thinking I should be there. So it was a really bittersweet evening. You know, I spoke to the boys after to congratulate them. And, you know, I could feel their joy. It was, when you care for people, you can only be happy for them, because, you know, I spent a lot of time with Cara and Stevie. But there was a part of me that was sick. There was a part of me that was gutted that I wasn't part of it. But then you have to just quickly get to a point where you go, took a while, by the way, where you go, you know what? Someone said to me, you're going to have 6 years, whatever it was, at Liverpool, and win trophies play it with the shirt on of the team you love, play in front of the Kop, you know, score at Old Trafford, Goodison, whatever. I mean, come on. I mean, I'd have snatched your hand off. Be thankful what you've had, not what you didn't have, you know?
No, it's true. You're in the 0.0001% of everyone who's had that dream, you know? We're not crying tears for you either, but it's tough. It is tough. You mentioned Carragher.
It was a tough watch.
Yeah, I can imagine. You mentioned Carragher and Gerrard there and the closeness. What friendships have survived moving on and survived retirement? Because we often hear, you know, footballers really tight and then it just drifts. So which friendships have survived for you over the last decade or so?
Well, I'm still in touch with them.
Right.
As the years have gone on, some years would be, you know, you'd see or speak to them more than others, depending on circumstances and busyness and family and kids being born and God knows what. But yeah, Cara and Steve, Cara, you know, we're in the same field. You know, we message, we speak. Stevie, obviously, in management. I saw Stevie recently, actually, at Gerald Houllier's memorial. It was great to see him, and Gary Mack. So, yeah, me and Stevie swap messages. I don't get to meet up with them very often. Obviously, it's been impossible anyway with COVID, as you know. But, yeah, so Stevie and Cara I've maintained a friendship with. Other than that, you get this world now where you stay in touch on social media. You know, John Arisa, Sammy Hippier, Jersey Dudek, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Jersey. People, you know, the social media keeps you active with others and seeing how their lives are, but probably those two being the main two, because of Michael I still see on the media circuit. Michael I still, you know, if I need a favour, I'll give him a shout. I need something signed or a tip on a horse race, I might give him a text. But, you know, it's hard. Life, you move on, and location-wise. But, yeah, I was the first to, you know, one of the first to send Stevie a message, congratulate him on the winning the league, of course. And Cara, as I say, I'm in touch with a lot because we share views on what we see on the on the media circuit. Normally the same views, actually, to be fair to me and Cara.
Good. It's funny, we never know what's going on in a footballer's life. So I know at Charlton you enjoyed that year, maybe second year less so, and end up at Spurs. And the sense I'd always had, I'm not even sure where you pick it up, a headline here or there, was that there'd been a falling out with Martin Yall, or that, you know, they just hadn't worked out in those kind of 19 months. And then just in advance of talking to you today, had a deeper look, and it's something completely unconnected with anything a fan might see. And it was the very sad passing of your father prematurely, and that understandably knocked you for six. That happened right in the kind of heart of your time at Spurs. And you know, again, looking in on the outside, I had no memory of that. I just thought God didn't really work out for him at Spurs for whatever reason.
I didn't talk about it, that's why. Maybe I should have. So I went in the January, which is never a good thing to do. Sure. And Tottenham were doing really well. So I was bought really for the next season because there was a huge confidence around the club that we were going to be in the Champions League and the squad was going to have to be better. The start of that second season, my daughter was born, which was a big thing as well. So that preoccupied me a little bit, as you can imagine. But then I got a little run in the team and started showing some form. And then, my old man got ill really quickly and out of the blue. And of course, I spent time with him up until he passed, which was a massive chunk of time in terms of the football world. It was probably, I don't know, say it was a month. You're not training, and emotionally, of course, it takes its toll. What you don't realise at the time, once he'd passed and I was desperately wanting to get back and occupy myself, is that I didn't realise the effect it had on me, not just physically, but emotionally as well. It was only years later I could look back and try and judge that. And of course, blaming somebody was easier in terms of falling out with Martin and, why aren't you playing me? Why are you playing him? Et cetera, et cetera. And you don't want to take responsibility. But I suppose in life, when wisdom comes to you as you get a bit older, you can look back and see what really went on. Yeah, I was in a ridiculously difficult position to try and play my best football. And probably the one thing I didn't do, which I chose not to, and I can't really think why. I suppose I didn't want everybody giving me sympathy. I chose not to speak. So then when I decided to leave Spurs because I'd kind of fallen back in the pecking order and not playing, because I love playing, a lot of clubs were saying to me and my agent, well, what's happened? And then I had to kind of explain the situation because, as you well rightly said, it looked like I'd just fallen off the cliff. And then I got the move to Fulham, and I have to say that the hierarchy at Tottenham were brilliant in making that. And Martin and I didn't fall out. We shook hands at the end. We had our words during my time there, but as I said, I have to take some responsibility for that.
Yeah.
It was a difficult time, and probably the one biggest regret in my career is not showing the Tottenham fans, other than probably 4 or 5 games, what I could really do.
And it would have suited you down to the ground, that club and that style of football as well. I mean, it looked like a good match.
Indeed, good players. They had a lot going on. Carrick was there, Edgar was there, Lennon, Keano. I'd give Keano, mate. Berber was there. Keano was brilliant with me as well because, he'd lost his dad years earlier, so he understood. Became a really good friend of mine, Robbie. It was a nice friendship to have in that moment. Great support, but the club was phenomenal. It was brilliant place to work, and I deeply regret not showing the fans that I had more to offer.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they understand, and it's interesting. So, this macho environment as well, and you mentioned Robbie Keane's father had passed far too soon as well. So, when you say support, I mean, is that like a come on, let's go out and have a few beers and just get off our heads?
But also talking about it.
Proper. Let's have a heart to heart. Let's try and how you feel and tell me your emotions.
No, even in a jokey way,
right.
even in a matter of fact way. Like bringing up the subject of someone's death is very difficult. I mean, it's obviously we've all got different stories, but what the normal thing was when I went back was a lot of lads just to be a little bit sensitive and Danny, you're right, yeah, all right, and then their head goes down and. Whereas Keano would just openly talk about it. He would, and then I might not play for a couple of weeks, or I'm on the bench, and he'd say to me, "Come on, you come into mine. We're going out. We're going to have some food and have a few beers. We'll have a night out." Even made me wear his gear one night. That's a different story.
That's a bit much.
But, well, no, do you know what? I'll tell you that quickly. We went out one night because he was trying to cheer me up. To be fair, well, I hadn't played. I got over my old man and that. And we went out, and I had no stuff. And he said, well, we're similar size. You can wear my gear. And the short version is that we were in a bar and we got talking to a few girls. And I'll never forget that one of them decided to lay into my gear. And Keano was not best pleased, let me tell you. But the irony was I was finding it hilarious, even though she was having to go at what I was wearing. So, yeah, that was Keano all over. He was great fun, great support.
Yeah, I can imagine that was important. This era we're talking about, by the way, I mean, geez, to play through it must have been fun. It was even great just to be able to watch it. You're talking that late 90s into the 99 United treble winning era. You've got the Arsenal Invincibles, as you mentioned. You're then into Mourinho and Chelsea, and then United come back with Ronaldo and Rooney and Tevez. And I think Fergie retires the same year as you, and Man City are on the scene. That's a lot of proper teams you're against, a lot of brilliant opponents. And I hate the, best opponent question, so I don't want to put it like that. But who are the ones you really remember thinking, when I'm at my best and he's at his best, this is great fun, us two going head to head?
It's difficult at times because a lot of the times you can admire players and you're on the same pitch and their brilliance is obvious, but you're not up against them.
Yes.
So there's wonderful talent that you come up against, and there's so many players that you could reel off, the best midfielders with this country's seen. But I always struggled a bit with Scholes. I try and go after him and get after him and let him know you're there and he'd play around you. Sit off him and he'd hurt you with his passing and spray it and play past you. And Carrick was another one I didn't like playing against. Very intelligent, always knew when to come after you, when to drop off, read your passes, always be thinking one step ahead.
Right.
And probably those two come to mind because they were playing for Man U, who were so successful. I didn't play too many times in central midfield up against the likes. So a couple of times I did Vieira, but it wasn't the same. I never felt like he could hurt you as much. Scholes was the one who you'd come off the pit thinking he's just ran the whole show, he's ran the game. Of course, Stevie was a difficult opponent, but I always felt more comfortable playing against Stevie than I did some of the other players I mentioned, even though I think Stevie's the best midfielder the Premier League's ever seen. Because I knew him, it didn't feel as difficult. It felt like I knew what he was going to do, and I felt like more comfortable against Stevie. So Scholes was probably the one. The one player I'd say that in my later years, playing for Fulham in a holding role, the one player who probably, strangely this one might sound, Tim Cahill. He was absolutely brilliantly disciplined at stopping me playing.
Right.
And in a very clever way. He'd mark you the wrong side. He'd come at you late. He'd try different ways of stopping you playing and getting on the ball. And then, of course, when you think you've got him, when he's playing in that 10 role, he'd be off your shoulder and he'd be on the back post scoring.
Yeah.
He was probably, in my later years, the one player I used to think, oh, no, not today. Can't be doing with Tim today.
See, that's a brilliant answer, because you could have said, the usual suspects, but Carrick and his thinking and being one step ahead, I think you have to be on a pitch with someone to fully sense that, and Cahill would have never jumped to my mind either. That intelligence is almost what you respect as much as anything out there.
Correct. And Carrick was really, really good at that. When I'm on the ball, he would even be looking at, it's like even like a wry smile, as if to say, I know what you're thinking. Don't play it there because I'll have it. And then you end up thinking to yourself, is he thinking that or is he not? And hopefully maybe some respect the other way, he was, the same thing. But
yeah,
I used to think he knows what I'm thinking here, so I'll second guess what I'm going to do. And more often than not, he'd end up be intercepting balls that you never thought he'd know were going to happen. So Carrick was a really special player. United still haven't replaced him.
That must be one of the real joys of playing at that level. Everybody's technically proficient, and it's I can almost sense you on the pitch scanning who are the brains out here, the Carricks, the Cahills, those kind of guys. Who did you click with in terms of a telepathic relationship as a teammate? Who was that one that you were like, I know what he's going to do, he knows what I'm going to do, this is just heaven?
I had a real purple patch with Bentley at Charlton. Really purple patch. I was playing in a number 10 role, and he was playing high up, and I just knew where he was going to run the whole time.
Did you talk about it off the pitch? Didn't need to?
Not really. No, because he was very good. Bentley knew what he couldn't do. He didn't come and try and look good. He wouldn't come and show and play round corners and bounce it off him. As soon as I got the ball, he's spinning and he's running and he's making good runs. I knew his runs. I knew where to put the ball. So we had a really purple patch together. Of course, Michael was easy to play with, like Fowler and even Keno. Keno was a joy to play with. His movement was phenomenal, Keno. But I didn't play enough with him to have that great connection. So Bentley, I mean, Andy Johnson at Fulham, we had a good little relationship going on when he was fit. Very similar to Bentley, play off the shoulders and make good passes, bad passes look good.
Roy Hodgson is 73 years of age. He's managed 1,000 professional matches, still in the Premier League, not just managing any old team. He's still in the Premier League, which is nuts. This is the great Indian summer of your career, isn't it? This really kind of, I don't know, cements a certain quality that, you know, people, because not that Charlton was beneath you, but you were a brilliant player at Liverpool, and you were unlucky with England. That was a golden generation, and your metatarsal did its thing in 2002, and you were clearly like best player at Charlton in many ways, and then Spurs didn't work out for reasons we've discussed. And I kind of think if it had drifted away there, that might have been unfulfilled. And yet those 5 years at Fulham, I felt almost reinstated. For in case there were any doubts, this guy was a quality player. I suspect important to you in that way too.
Yeah, it's a great point you make. I had to reinvent myself a little bit and show people that, you know what, remind people. I wasn't thinking that when I was trying to get back to playing well and you know, making an impact. But I certainly had a hunger in me still then, which probably came from the things you said. The first season was really difficult. We stayed up last day when I got the goal at Portsmouth, and Laurie Sanchez wasn't on the same page as me in terms of how we wanted to play. Of course not. But when Roy came in, he made some really astute signings: Schwartz, Andy Johnson, Bobby Zamora, Gira, people like Damien Duff. And the way he played was very similar to Julian. We didn't quite have the Liverpool quality, but well organised, good professionals, players who want to do the right things, working together, training well. It fit. It was a perfect fit for what I needed at the time. He gave me the armband. I felt fit and comfortable, and everything was fine at home. I was starting to influence games and dictate games in a midfield role, a central midfield role, where I had to curb my enthusiasm to go and try and score goals and make things happen so much and just leave that to others. That was the biggest challenge for me. In that I'd always been somebody who could make goals and score goals. I still made chances in that role at Fulham, but I was not scoring as much. You know, I wasn't. My role changed, and I had to really fight hard to change my game. And then when I got comfortable in that role, I started realising that I could impact others with my organisation, encouragement, whatever it was, and it just became a real enjoyable place to play football.
Yeah,
it was a great ground in terms of it was always full. There wasn't a high expectancy. There was a team that believed in what the manager wanted. There was good experience. There was a really nice atmosphere to play your football, and we thrived. We really did.
It sounds good. All those things are like everything you say that Hodgson puts in place. On paper, they make perfect sense, and you would think, well, everyone should go and do that. And clearly, it's so much more difficult than it would seem. We had Stephen Kelly on not so long ago. Obviously, you know, get the Irish guys on quite a bit, and the Europa.
Well, I'm nearly Irish. My dad was born in Cork.
Is that right? Jeez.
Yeah, he came over here when he was a baby.
Would you not have come over? Not have come over and got 100 Ireland caps for us? No.
Do you know what? When I was made aware that I could, I was already disqualified being able to do so, because back then I'd played for England under 18s or 20s in a tournament, World Youth Cup, I think. So that disqualified me from even having the choice.
Right. So Stephen Kelly was on. He was talking. It was the anniversary last year of the Europa League final run, all the way through to Atletico. And look, there's a lot of great. The Juventus game looms large, and there's you beat Hamburg, German champions, and at that Atletico team, obviously, all those players went on to become household names in a massive way. And yet Stephen Kelly was adamant. He said, forget about just that season. He said, I think the best team I've ever played against was Shakhtar. That you just have no idea. I've no memory of this game, but I heard you say, I think you were talking to Jimmy Bullard. I listened to a podcast you'd done a while back, which was great. He's mad as a box of frogs in a wonderful way, isn't he? But you were saying something similar. I think Fernandinho and Douglas Costa and Willian, and it was just bum, 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 and chasing shadows for a lot of it.
If you ever want to watch a game of football where you see how important a coach is and what they do on a training pitch, is Fulham at home to Shakhtar Donetsk.
Okay.
So we score early on and late on. Score in the first minute, and Bobby scored a wonder goal late on, and we beat them 2-1. But the majority of the game was them playing wonderful football against a super well-drilled, organised, good communicators, senior players knowing our jobs. They play through and around and bap, unbelievable technical football. And we stay patient. We stay with the job in hand. We stay with the orders from the manager. We stay close. We stay compact. We don't get angry. We don't get frustrated. We don't get worried about the crowd moaning and groaning that we can't get the ball, don't come out of position. We stay disciplined. It's a phenomenal example of what a well-coached football team can achieve against a technically superior football team on the same pitch.
Really interesting. God, there's a gazillion things I wanted to ask you. I won't get to them all. I'm curious on England, and you were around the time of that golden generation, and all the hype. Were you sitting there with your, understanding of, I think at Crewe you played in a midfield 3, so you understood the different ways football could be played from a young age. Did you look at this rigid 4-4-2 and look at Sven and say, this is not going to cut it? This is not going to cut it. If Lampard and Gerrard are being outplayed, then there's something wrong here tactically, or what were your thoughts around that time?
There was always conversations, yeah. Some of the lads saying maybe we should try and tweak it, or why doesn't he play him there and him there? There were conversations, but ultimately, I think the quality they had in the team, they still believed they could win playing that way.
Okay.
And there was a belief that if you play Michael, he had to play with somebody. Now, Michael's talent, that's not right. Michael would have been fine on his own. Yes, Heskey helped him. But if you're talking about playing Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard in a 3 and playing Beckham wide right, maybe Joe Cole wide left, or Kieran Dyer, whoever it was, you change the whole dynamic of the team, and the supply would have come to Michael through other areas. I think it was because Sven thought Michael needed a meal, and he didn't really want to play Beckham in a different position to what he did at Man United, and because he was so influential. But ultimately, yeah, we did think that. I did think that. But in the moment, you only think it per each game comes along, and we could have done better in that game, or maybe if we'd have played that way. I think only now looking back, and the way football's evolved, that conversation's become more prevalent.
A final point then on Crewe, and you said, if anyone's just joining us, talking to Danny Murphy here, where he came through at Crewe and made his senior debut at 16. In so many ways, they were ahead of their time, modelled on Ajax, and you were playing in different positions and time with the ball, and clearly did so many things right. And I know you have a huge amount of time for Dario Gradi and the impact he had in your career. Obviously, it's been just desperately sad more than anything over the last couple of years to see the players coming forward and talking about the abuse they suffered. I know on Wednesday, an independent review, for instance, of Gradi, who was Crewe's manager from 83 to 07, they said he should have done more to investigate concerns about Barry Bonnell. But they did stress he wasn't involved in a cover-up. So we should stress that point as well. It's such a mess. I mean, like it or not, Gradi's now associated with it in the public eye, and I'm sure that's a source of sadness to you. And it's just horrific. I know you said a couple of years ago when it all started coming out into the public, you weren't shocked. You'd obviously heard whispers or rumour of some sort, Danny.
Well, we were interviewed in the 90s by the police, when it first came out, while I was at Crewe.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, after he'd left, there was some rumours about, the certain things. But when you're a young child, when I went to Crewe when I was about 12, 13. So when he left, I was probably 14, 15. You hear the odd thing, but you're so focused on your own world and your own bubble that, you're not capable of taking any action or investigating. That's not your job to. But yeah, there was rumours. And then, of course, a bit later on, when it got exposed in the 90s, we were interviewed and the things started coming out. But the thing to say for me is really simple. And I spoke about this in my column on Sunday. For a lot of people, a lot of young lads, and this doesn't hide from the fact and the problems that were at Crewe, and the way they've dealt with it's not been very good. I must repeat that.
Yeah.
But for me and lots of others, the environment was very safe and enjoyable and very beneficial. Now, that's the way it should be for all kids. And any wrongdoing or any cover-ups or any things that can be learned or punished should be. I'm all for that. It's a situation that's horrendous for the club. It's horrendous for the people involved. But as you said, Dario was not an abuser. He's apologised for not doing. He says he wasn't aware, and he could have. I don't think that man, knowing him like I do, would have let children be abused or hurt if he thought that's what was happening. I can't believe that. From the man I spent years with, He's a very caring man. I don't believe for 1 second that that's the case. Now, could he have done things differently and investigated things more? Yes, probably. Do I think that haunts him? Probably. And he doesn't sleep at night thinking about what he could have and should have done? Probably. But all I can talk about is my own experience. It doesn't mean that some of the lads, and friends of mine, by the way, some of the lads involved are friends of mine.
Right.
I feel their pain, and it doesn't help them that I had a good experience.
Yes.
It doesn't help them that other kids didn't have to suffer this. That doesn't help them, and I understand the need for justice. But I have to say from my experience that the Crew Academy and the Crew journey that I went on was very beneficial and very enjoyable for me.
I guess you have to count yourself extremely lucky, don't you? I think your time in Benel's coincided for maybe a year or so, and he was around.
I stayed at his house.
Wow.
I stayed at his house one evening. One evening I stayed at his house. It was a very normal evening. I didn't suspect a thing.
Right.
I didn't have a bad experience. I know what a monster he is, by the way.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, do you think my parents would let me stay there if they thought he was a monster? Now, there is always an argument of why coaches let players stay at their houses, etc., etc. I mean, we're talking a long time ago where life was very different. It wouldn't happen now. But yeah, I feel lucky that I wasn't involved in his web of abhorrent behaviour and abuse. I mean, I was lucky. Yeah, I do feel lucky.
God, staying in his house, that's a chilling thought now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's my main concern is for the lads. The bravery they've showed in coming out is phenomenal. I think it's been a brilliant thing that the lads did to come out and then help others come out and talk about these problems and hopefully get to a point where we are not worried about our children going to play football, because that's just beyond where we ever should be.
It's difficult to segue away from that topic. It's so serious and dwarfs everything else we're talking about, but I'll do it nonetheless. As we look to the future, brilliant pundit that you are, should you not be in management, really? Do you you must have that itch to scratch, I would have thought.
I thought that would be the way I would go. Started on the journey of my badges. Nothing quite happened. The media work started by accident, really. A little bit of fun. Started getting asked to do more. And then when Brendan was at Liverpool, Brendan Rodgers, he changed his staff, if you remember. And I went to see him and had a chat with him about taking on a role, which filled me with excitement. But Gary Mack got the job ahead of me, which was fine. And Brendan's phoned me and explained, and I was appreciative of the opportunity. But that was probably the only time I was given an opportunity that I thought that I might really be able to enjoy and get my teeth into. And then over time, when the media stuff started progressing and I was enjoying it, and I found a nice life balance in terms of spending time with my kids and family, playing golf and doing that, I moved away from the idea of coaching and management to a degree because of the instability of it, the stress levels of it, and of course the fact that if you take on any job at any level, you're 7 days a week. And for me, the balance of spending time with my children and especially after the breakup of my marriage and stuff like that, it was priorities. And the media work gives me the opportunity to spend tremendously good quality time with my children.
Yeah, I guess you'll never regret that. And the last one then, how did you, this is probably, it's a big question, but curious, how did you find that transition from adulation, ridiculous amounts of money arriving into your bank account, everything done for you, to real world former footballer Danny Murphy?
Initially, fine. It's like a break, like a holiday. Bit of media work, enjoying your freedom, drink when you want, party when you want, play golf when you want, go on holiday when you want. And a couple of years in, I hit a brick wall, to be honest, found it really, really tough. Didn't really understand why. Started going down a destructive path, really.
And without prying, what's a destructive path entail?
Just putting me first, going out too much, drinking too much, self-indulgence, not thinking about, just all about me, and not understanding why I was looking for escapism. So with a bit of help, friends and support, I got some professional help, did a bit of therapy, spoke out to people, and quickly found myself in a better place. You know, I was brave enough to do that. I think it's a lot of mental health conversations around at the moment, and I think that's great that players are talking more. But I think it's very difficult to try and enlighten a player who's playing the game what's going to come.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to give them the reality of that, because it hits you like a sledgehammer. It's just when it hits you.
Mm.
How do you occupy yourself? How do you not get into a position where when it hits you, you're in a good position to be able to deal with it.
Yes.
So yeah, it was difficult for a while, but yeah, thankfully I came through that and feel better because of it. Actually, understanding it, talking about it, and actually just getting to a point where you can be comfortable with what you're doing now and not reminisce and think, oh, you know, my life's over because I can't play football anymore. Well, I can still play, but not very well. So yeah, no, I think it's good to talk, and I think it's good that people are able to share that they might need some help and get some help.
Yeah,
it's nothing wrong with asking for help.
No, far from it. It's far more common, I suspect, than we all think. Because you wouldn't have had therapy after your father's passing, for instance.
No, and grieving is a process that's difficult for anybody and then very different for people. That was part of it, of course. I'd put that to bed, hadn't I? You know, I'd not dealt with it. And then, you know, there's lots of other aspects. The adulation you talk about, the financial clarity comes into play of what's been going on during your career. There's people out there who are, you know, financially abusing footballers. We talk about sexual abuse, but financial abuse is rife in the game.
I'll bet.
That was part of it. So yeah, all these things come into play, and I think we're in a better place now for ex-footballers to come out of the game and actually be able to find solace in certain other footballers or establishments or organisations. I think we're getting better.
Good. Well, listen, I've kept you slightly longer than planned, but it was absolutely fascinating. Thoroughly enjoyed the chat. Danny Murphy, such a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers. Danny Murphy there with us, and it's part of our Paddy Power special here on Off the Ball this evening. With Paddy Power's ACCA Cracker, you can insure your ACCA. If one leg of your 4 legs or more ACCA lets you down, you get your stake back as a free bet. It's available in all football matches and markets. For information on responsible gambling, visit Gamblingcare.ie. And just in light of the discussion we had towards the end there with Danny on Crew, if you do need to talk to someone about child sexual abuse or you were affected by the conversation, then 1 in 4 are available on 01662 4070. That's 01662 4070.